Okay, so we're going to go ahead and get started. I'm going to call the City of Killeen City Council Workshop to order, and special City Council Workshop meeting for Tuesday, August 8, 2017. And let the record show that we have Mr. Rivera, Mrs. Fleming, Mrs. King, and Mr. Kilpatrick present. The others, I think, will come in later. We only got one item for discussion, and that's DS 17-090, discuss proposed FY 17-18 budget, which includes our tax rate, general fund, water and sewer fund, and our solid waste fund. So I don't know how much of that we're going to get today, but hopefully we will. So with that, I'm going to just turn it over to our city manager, Mr. Olson.
Thank you, Mayor. I want to remind all the council that everybody who has a microphone to speak directly into the microphone. We are capturing the meeting on videotape, and the sound is really important, and these microphones don't catch a wide angle. You have to talk right into them, or we don't pick up what you're saying. So, and I'll try to do the same. Last week we started off by having an all-fund summary and a summary of the general fund, and we started through alphabetically through city departments, and we made it partway through the general fund. Our goal today, and we will need to keep it moving, is to answer questions that came up last week, first of all, and that deals with the tax rate primarily. Then we're going to move directly back to the general fund, and we're going to pick up where we left off and start moving department by department through the general fund. Hopefully we'll finish that and be able to move on to the water and sewer fund, complete that, and move on to the solid waste fund. So our goal is to get that far through our budget this evening. There were several people, two people last week that asked for a line item budget. I believe we have that for them over in the city council chambers across the street. Are there any other preliminaries that I need to talk about before I get started? Okay, seeing none, I am going to move directly into the property tax discussion. There were questions asked last week about the tax rates and other questions about property taxes particularly, so I thought we'd start today by rehearsing that again in a little bit more detail. Let's go to the next one. What you see on this first page, and does everybody have a copy of this? All right, so you should have a copy at your places there. What you see on the first page is kind of a history of the property tax. Left-hand column is the year. The next column over is the tax rate that we've had for all of those years. The freeze-adjusted taxable value of the property in our city, the exemption value, and then finally the actual amount of the tax levy itself. The thing I want to point out is the exemption value column. 10 years ago, in 2007, it was about 10% of our property value. In 2018, it's about 20%. And you'll see another graph here in a moment that shows that it is increasing exponentially. It is going up disproportionate with our population increase. Let's go to the next slide. This is a graph that shows how we compare in property tax to other municipalities. We are third from the top, and our tax rate is 74.98 cents. There are two cities that have a higher tax rate than we have, and the rest of them have a lower tax rate, although there's a whole bunch in the center that are pretty similar. The blue section indicates the amount of the property tax being used for operations, and the red part indicates the amount of the property tax being used for debt service. And you can see that there are several cities with a substantial portion being used for debt service. I think our target there ought to be about 25%. And if I remember the numbers correctly, we are at about 40% in Killeen. So our goal over the next several years will be to work that down into a smaller percentage. Let's go to the next slide. This is a description of how property tax works. And the first bullet shows that in order to compute your tax, you take the taxable value times the tax rate, and that equals the amount of taxes that a jurisdiction receives. In Texas, there are a couple of ways to think about taxes, and it's described in the law. The first one is called current tax rate, and in our case, it's also the proposed tax rate for fiscal 18. That's the tax rate that we currently have, 74.98 cents. Then there's an effective tax rate, which is the level of tax that it would take to bring in the same amount of money as we had last year. So you've got taxable value going up, meaning your tax rate could go down in order to get the same amount of taxes. That's called effective tax rate. And when we come to our tax hearings, there's going to be some language in there required of us by the state that basically says we're increasing taxes. And there's a difference between increasing taxes and increasing tax rate. You can increase taxes by holding your tax rate steady, but increasing in value, in taxable value. And that, in my mind, that does not equal a tax increase, but in some of the definition in the law, it does equal a tax increase. You have to understand how that works in order to be conversant with what we're talking about and understanding what it means. And then there's rollback tax rate. So part of the state law says that a municipality can only increase a certain amount of value without hitting a rollback rate. And if that value and the taxation goes above that level, which currently is 8%, then it is possible then for citizens to petition for an election to roll it back to the 8% level. And that 8% level equals 72.23 cents. Okay, again, that's really important to understand. Now, you need to know that at the state legislature and the special, during the regular session and now during the special session, there's been a lot of discussion about changing that 8% to something lower. The Senate is currently talking about a 4% cap. The House is talking about 6%, and they're going to come together and decide what they're going to do. But it is possible, maybe even likely, that the 8% will be reduced. Now, the net effect of that, you need to understand, is that it suppresses a city's incentive to grow and to promote economic development, because the smaller that growth increment that they allow us, it starts to make you ask, why should we spend money to grow when the state will simply cap us and not let us take the growth increment? So those become policy issues. As you set your legislative agendas, you need to be thinking about those kinds of things, because they will come up and they will be an impact. It will be an impact on us. And you need to ask yourself the question, how much money do we want to spend on economic development when we reap fewer and fewer rewards from that investment? Okay, so that's how property taxes work for us in the city of Killeen in the state of Texas. Let's go to the next page. In the budget that I'm proposing, here's how I'm proposing to use the tax rate, the 74.98 cents. I'm proposing that we commit 46.58 cents to our operations. That's the blue line that you saw on that previous slide. And that we commit 25.65 cents to debt. which is the red portion of that previous graph. And that 40%, in this proposal, that 40% is being reduced. I can't remember the number now, but if approved, the FY18 budget will no longer have 40% committed to debt service. It'll be down in the 30s. And then I'm proposing that we commit 2.75 cents to a capital fund for future capital projects, of which we have many that we need and want. Now, that 2.75 cents is also the increment between our current tax rate and the rollback rate. And so if it's approved as recommended to you by myself, then it would be possible for someone to put together a petition for a rollback election. And if that passed, we would have to reduce the 2.75 cents back to the rollback rate. And I'm proposing it this way, number one, because we need the capital projects really bad, and number two, if there were a successful rollback election, it would not impact our operations. You can imagine that a rollback election could throw our operations into chaos because it takes a number of months to get a petition up, then it takes a couple more months before you have the election. We could be halfway through a fiscal year before we found out that we had to pay back a bunch of money. And that's just chaotic. So I'm proposing that we put it in a capital fund. And even if we wanted to spend it quickly, you can't spend it that fast on capital projects because you have to go through a planning and a design phase before you get down to spending the money. So we would be well past any rollback election that might need to take place. Okay, let's go to the next slide. This is how the property tax appraisal process works, and you can read that on your own. The point I want to make here is each year we don't know what our property taxes are going to be until the 25th of July. So I think in future years it's been kind of a practice here to deliver a budget to the City Council the first part of July, but I just think that that is unwise because we don't even know how much money we've got to work with until the end of July. And I think we can do a lot of work, we do a lot of planning, but we can't finalize our proposals to the City Council until we have those property tax numbers. Let's go to the next slide. All right, so this dollar bill represents where your property tax money goes. And for what it says is that for every dollar of property tax you pay, 45 cents goes to the school district, 30 cents goes to the city of Killeen, and another 25 cents goes to the county and some other special districts. And I had the pleasure of speaking to a Chamber of Commerce group last week, and when I pointed this out, I pointed out to them that we often, as a city, take the brunt of the displeasure of paying property taxes. I would like it a lot, if people are going to be displeased about paying property tax, I would like it a lot if they were equally grumpy with all of the taxing entities and not just the city about that issue. Because we are a minor part, less than a majority part of the property taxes that are paid. Let's go to the next page. This page demonstrates if you have an average home with an average home value, how much property tax you pay, how much it has changed because of changing appraisals over the past year, and how that impacts you on an annual basis and how it impacts you on a monthly basis. It's just simply intended to give you an idea of the magnitude of the change. Now, I can't remember, John, maybe you can help me. Was this just for the city, or was that for the entire tax levy? Okay, thank you. Just for the city, he said. Let's go to the next page. This is intended to show you the impact of exemptions, and this includes military exemptions, exempt public property exemptions, senior exemptions. It's the whole array of exemptions for property tax that are out there. And you can see from this center that the percentage and the portion of exemptions is growing. And Killeen is in a unique position across the state of Texas because of our high military retired population here. And the exemptions are increasing rapidly and having a big impact on us. For example, I believe that those exemptions currently amount to about $4.5 million a year on the city budget, which is approximately the equivalent of 15 cents on the tax rate. It is significant when you look at the full impact of property tax exemptions. And here's the other thing I will say. Nobody likes paying tax. People particularly dislike, especially the legislature, dislikes property tax. And so they're constantly looking at increasing additional exemptions on the property tax. But the irony of all that is the more they tinker with it, the less fair it becomes and the bigger impact it has on the people who are left to pay the bill. So it's a great thing for those that are exempt. It becomes extra burdensome for those who are not. And from a policy standpoint, we just really need to look at this whole issue and be, I think, more bold in our policy position on what's happening, particularly at the state. Let's go to the next page.
Can I ask you something on this one?
Yes, sir.
On this one, it shows that in 2007, where it says freeze adjustable tax value, is that like $3 billion in property that we had back then? Is that the total? So if we had like in 2007, $3.5 billion, and then we look at today, it's about $5.4 billion, and you can say that's the growth that we've had. We've added $2 billion. So without that growth, where would we be? I mean, because we're losing, 20%. So the good thing is that, the city continues to grow and we've added, and that growth is very important when we're looking at things like that, because if we don't add more properties to the tax roll, then we can really be hurting.
I think that's basically true, Mayor, and but temper that thought with, if you recall some of the other graphs that I've shown where the income per capita, the city's income per capita has been decreasing, the employee base per capita has been decreasing. So while we have had growth, our ability to serve has been increasing at a decreasing rate. So we have not been keeping up with the growth that we've been having in terms of how we're serving the population. So there's two sides to the coin, and you need to understand both sides of it.
Okay. Mr. Kilpatrick.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. There's one element of this growth, projected growth, which we have really very little control over, but we will suffer the impact over, and that is with the growth of the Department of Defense. Fort Hood grows, we grow. There's no way we can put signs up on our city limits and say, you can't live here, you need to go to a neighboring city. So we're going to get that growth. And therefore, I agree with the city manager. It's going to be very important and incumbent upon this body to really look at the policies that we make to adjust for that growth. How insignificant or how large it is doesn't really matter. It's going to come. So we need to ensure that we don't stifle some parts of our business practices, and then we will see that exemption of value grow even greater in an ascending portion. So instead of it leveling it at 20% or 22%, we could very see that going up to where it would be the potential of 25 to 30%. So if you take 3 cents out of every dollar, it's very, very important in my aspect that we look at those policies regarding that matter. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
All right, Mrs. King.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Mr. Olson,
Yes,
sir.
ma'am.
Being a veteran myself, we do bring something to the city. And revenue, we do buy items, we pay for water and everything. So being a veteran, I think that it's important that our service and what we have done for this country should be acknowledged. And I understand it's tax-based and everything. And I heard a statement that you made in reference to we have to do something. And the only thing I can see, if we want to be fair across the board, and correct me if I am wrong, it has to be some kind of fee to be fair across the board. Am I correct?
I think that is one solution, perhaps part of a solution. I think the bigger way to look at it in terms of equity and fair treatment, because I agree with, I'm a veteran too. I agree that there's a tremendous contribution to be made there, and we should acknowledge it. I don't disagree with all that. The question is, who's going to pay the bill? And honoring our veterans in this way is a statewide, in my view, is a statewide issue. It's not a city issue. And it was a statewide referendum that expanded and created tax-exempt status for certain veterans, and it should be a statewide issue to pay that bill, and not, that is an unfunded mandate that has been rolled down from the state to cities, and Killeen takes a disproportionate impact because of our high veteran population. So I think the first line of attack should be to talk to the state legislature and encourage them to be the ones that pick up the cost of that benefit and not roll it down to, well, particularly to us.
And before you speak, Mrs. Fleming, I just want to remind everybody to speak into the mic since this is being
Yes,
recorded.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Mr. Olson, I'm a little confused too, because looking at the military, the veterans, which does have a big impact on our community, and looking at Fort Hood, at the number of people that Fort Hood has lost in the past years, we've lost a lot of military. And to me, I don't think we're going to ever get that impact back to Fort Hood like we've had. I think we've lost, 25,000 on the last. I really don't know the exact number, and I can't say it, and I may be wrong, but some of the increase on those taxes did come from the military. So we're hoping that we don't really just depend on the military to bring the taxes up, because that's going to really hurt us in the long run. So we're going to have to be realistic to say that, we can depend on this maybe without so much dependent on Fort Hood. So I don't know if I'm right or wrong, but does it make sense?
It does, and to allay your concerns, our economic growth that seems to be taking place in Killeen is not proportional to Fort Hood right now. So it is growing independent of Fort Hood in a bigger amount than it ever has. Now, Fort Hood is the big gorilla in the area. It always will be, and we need to celebrate that and embrace it and make the very best out of it.
Well, the only reason I said that was because years ago we had a big impact with Fort Hood. A lot of businesses have to close down. So, you know, we never know what's going to happen with our infrastructure, with the community. So there should be some kind of plan in motion if this does happen, that we will be prepared for that. That's all I'm concerned about, sir.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you.
Okay, continue on.
Okay, let's go to the next page. This graph demonstrates what kinds of exemptions, that 20% that we just looked at, it shows where that comes from. For example, 52% are coming from disabled veterans, 40% from qualifying public properties. Those are primarily government and some other exempted properties. About 6.5% are coming from the over 65 exemption, and charitable organizations and pollution control are fractions of that amount. But that demonstrates the whole exemption issue. Let's go to the next page. And this shows the increasing rate of disabled veteran exemptions. So hopefully that gives you a comprehensive, well-rounded view of property taxes and how they work and how they apply to us in the city of Killeen. Now we're going to move on to the general fund. We're going to pick up where we left off and start with our community services department. I will say that one of the things we've done here is where it's made sense, we have broken all of the departments down into the various divisions and services that they provide. So while the community services department is one department, Brett is going to have multiple presentations because inside of his department, and this is just an example of all the rest of them as well, it's divided into different kinds of services that are provided through that department. And we've tried to isolate those and explain what their mission is and what their costs are so that you have a good understanding of what it is we're doing as a city.
Mr. Olson, I just had a question for you. First, I just want to say I think that getting back to our property tax rate and what you're going to do, what you're going to propose, I think that's a great idea. I think that's the right approach, having the capital improvement and then part of that applying it to our debt service. But the question I had on that is on the debt service, if you hold part of that to that debt service, because I know you said that we may have to worry about maybe have an election and do a rollback, how soon can you apply that to our debt service? Is that the same thing? Is there a time period when we don't have to worry about, okay, now we can start paying it without having to worry about
Both the operations, even with the rollback election, the operations and the debt service are safe. We don't have to worry about not being able to pay our bills or operate our city. So those are safe. The thing that would be at risk with a rollback election would be our capital projects funding.
Okay.
Does that answer your question?
Well, because, part of that, I think it was 0.2565 you were going to apply to debt service.
Correct.
And that's the part I'm talking about. So if you take that 2565 and say, we got to hold it before we apply it to debt service, or can we just go ahead and start applying it?
We can just start applying it.
Okay.
Yeah, we absolutely don't want to put our bond rating or our credit rating at risk, and this will not do that.
That will not affect it. Okay. All right. Mr. Okry.
It's just one other thing, Mr. Olson, on the capital, the 2 point. You're saying the 0.0275% for capital. What type of mechanism are we looking at to ensure that this is for capital, it's only spent for capital? How do we restrict that?
I'm recommending along with this that we create a capital projects fund into which this money would go. It would be accounted for and received and expended in a way that is completely separate. Remember at the beginning, At the beginning, I showed you that the city has a number of funds. Each of them are legally separate. You cannot commingle the money. You have to be very careful about how money moves between the funds. And so what I'm recommending as a companion recommendation to this dedicated portion of the property tax is that we create a separate fund and ensure that way that it can only be spent for capital and it will not come back into the operations.
And that's barring if we have a rollback election that takes that out of there.
Correct.
All right, thank you.
All right, welcome, Mr. Williams.
Sir,
Just-
Mayor, Council, Mr. Manager.
You got to speak into the mic. I'll be reminded.
Okay, we're going to start with administration, and I'll try to be as swift as
I
possible.
think we need a longer mic for him.
Yeah, Community Services Department mission is to enhance quality of life for all citizens, providing parks, recreation facilities, and programs. Quickly, this is basically a new division that was created that removed the Director of Community Services, the admin assistant, and an accounting position out of the Lions Club Park operation so we could truly isolate costs related to each cost center. Here you can see the mission elements for this area. Basically, it's a general overview of all of community services in the areas that we touch. Goals for 17-18 for the administration, we're going to look at reorganization of basically all of our areas of operation. And you can see those listed as golf, recreation, athletics, parks and public grounds, and aquatics. That's just going to be necessary as we deal with declining budgets and how we can become more efficient as an organization. You see 0.33% of full-time employees in the fund. That's basically 3 employees. And you can see the enterprise, 3 employees, 0.23%. How we fit in the enterprise, 0.28% in the general fund, 0.13% in the overall enterprise. Staffing, you can see the historical data there as it was just created this year, and so those will be the 3 positions I mentioned at the beginning. Revenue, there's no revenue. It's simply operating cost, which will be the $230,905. And you'll see that reflected here again on the expense portion of the budget. Explanation, new division extracted from Lions Club Park operations. Decision packages, none were submitted. And there are no city manager comments. So we will, athletics will be the next one up, Mr. Moore. Okay, athletics, mission is to provide athletic programming primarily to youth. This has been adjusted. It's youth and adults traditionally, but this year we're going to be more geared toward youth. We will still offer adult softball, which will be the only adult program we will do. Our mission elements, league administration for sports. By the numbers, youth participants, just over 2,200, adult teams at 117, tournaments via softball tournaments, as well as baseball tournaments listed at 6. Our goals for 17-18, we're going to explore consolidating our athletics and our recreation divisions together to create more coverage and leverage our resources. Common theme you'll see on all slides, you'll see audit programs to determine areas for increased financial and operational efficiencies. With the financial climate that we're in, that's a must that we figure out ways to become more efficient. And so that will be the theme for every cost center within community services. We're also going to explore affiliations with sports associations. That's how we're going to seek to grow our programs, by bringing in sports associations to offer leagues. And so they can offer things in addition to what we offer. 0.33%, it's 3 employees in the general fund, which are athletic employees. 0.4% of the budget, 0.18% of the entire enterprise. Staffings remain consistent. You can see 3 employees comprise our athletics division. Our revenue budget, you'll see in 15-16, we're at about $162,000. You'll see this year we're projecting $155,000, and next year we're looking at $150,000. The decline, 2 things we'll attribute that to. And you'll see that is outsourcing of soccer. That's now run by an association. Tri-County Soccer Club, we did that 2.5 years ago. Now it's a significant portion of revenue that goes there that we used to derive from there that we no longer derive. And then also an increase in our fees. I'll be honest, our athletic registration fees for our adult sports, a trend that we see, the higher that fee is, the lower the participation numbers are. The lower the fee is to participate in our adult sports, the more numbers we get. And I would attribute that to adults just willing to probably contribute more to their kids as opposed to what they do for themselves. And you'll see reduction in athletic programs. We're proposing to eliminate an adult volleyball, basketball, flag football, and kickball. The only adult sports we will offer in the coming fiscal year will be slow pitch softball. Some things we've had some discussions with at the staff level on how we're going to do this is we may entertain tournaments so we can make sure they're self-sustaining. And so we may do volleyball tournaments for adults, volleyball tournaments for adults, adult basketball and volleyball, pardon me.
Mayor, got a question there.
Sir.
Mr. Rivera.
I probably heard, maybe I heard wrong. I just want to make sure, so I'll keep track of this. You said you're going to reduce sport event in our city?
We are going to reduce the leagues that are offered for adults. We currently do adult volleyball, adult basketball, flag football, and kickball. We're proposing to not offer those next year as part of our athletic programming. We'll maintain all of our youth programming. We'll make a reduction in those adult programs.
And this is because we're not breaking even in those areas, or what?
I don't know so much if it's breaking even. We've got a budget number that we try to get in. There's a balance that you have to strike. There's delicate balance. There's sports that, majority of what you do in Parks and Recreation is not a profitable business. Some are, some are not. On our adult side, we have to make a decision between youth and adults. If we were to leave all the athletic programming there, the only area that we can go to is to go into salaries to try to generate the cost savings that we need to stay within our budget number. And if you eliminate those staffing, we've got 3 employees. Those 3 employees are required to run all of our youth sports. So if you reduce those, then you run the risk of compromising your youth programming, and we put that first and foremost.
Thank you.
Can I ask a follow-up on that, on our adults? When you have different organizations that are not part of the city where they're doing it, but they want to use the facilities, is that still going to be available?
Yes, our facilities are still available for rental. There's an association that I've got a meeting set up with here in the next 2 weeks with the CVB that we're going to look at bringing in some sporting opportunities to be honest, though you'll see potentially a reduction in our adult sports, we're actually hoping to have more activity at our fields, and those are going to be through some partnerships.
Okay.
The expense budget, you can see the actual 15-16 of $342,000. We're estimating this year at $348,000. You'll see in 17-18 the rate of $325,000. Expense variance, and it's related to the elimination of the adult sports I previously mentioned. Decision package is approved. None disapproved. You'll see the cost of offering the adult programs at $21,000. A youth summer open gym program, which would cost about $20,000, which would be done in a partnership with a local organization. We're going to be managed in 18. Adult softball is going to be the only adult sport we mentioned, but then we're going to explore outsourcing opportunities for various sports that we can offer. No city manager comments?
Mr. Kilpatrick.
Yes, sir.
Mr. Kilpatrick had a question. Go ahead.
Going back to when we talked about exploring affiliations of sports associations. Did we not at one time have an affiliation with the PGA for youth golf? And did that, I think that sort of fell away, or do we still
Yeah.
have that?
Well, our affiliation with the PGA right now is non-existent at the golf course because our pro is not a PGA pro, and that is something that we are going to address moving forward. In order to have that PGA program, your pro has to be a member of the PGA. And so what we have now is we have youth programs that we offer out there, whether it's individual clinics, group clinics we offer, youth tournaments. We did a pretty big youth tournament just on last Monday. We do those events, but in terms of being PGA affiliated, we do not have those events, and that's directly related to not having a PGA pro.
Because as I recall, quite a few years ago,
Thing.
that it was a big thing, especially for the disadvantaged youth, because PGA took the entire brunt of those funds, provided all the equipment and everything to get them interested and acquainted with the sport of golf. so that we could have a generations to follow.
Your point is valid. We've had discussions about that at the golf course and how our growth out there actually is with the youth. And so that is something that we're going to, reshape our operations to gear toward capturing those youth. The First Tee program is a big part of that, which is through the PGA. And that's something that we've got to get back reestablished here.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
All right. Family Aquatic Center. Provide aquatic programming for the citizens of Killeen and anyone else who wants to come swim. Mission elements, pretty simple, provide aquatic activities. By the numbers, you can see admission tickets sold to the Family Aquatic Center, just over 50,000. Swim lesson participants this year, just under 800. Just an idea of our inventory, we've got a Family Aquatic Center and 2 pools, Long Branch active, Pershing pool, which is currently not active. Goals for 17-18, we need to do some position reclassification to make sure we provide adequate supervision for the Family Aquatic Center, and we intend to try to do that within current staff resources. And also, we're going to explore options for offering American Red Cross swim lessons an additional 2 times per year, as opposed to the current just summer offering that we do.
Mrs. Fleming?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Mr. Williams, I just have one question on the Persian Park swimming pools. Why is that closed? Is there a reason why it's closed there?
We had significant failures there 2 years ago in the funding to open it back up. We currently do not have that funding. Our master plan, a preliminary master plan that we have reviewed, calls for a remodel of that. We have worked with Junior Service League of Killeen, who was our partner on the splash pad at Long Branch Park, and they actually are willing to commit $75,000 over the next 5 years, $15,000 a year for a project over there, and we're looking at a concept that would be a wet-dry playground concept with party pavilions around the side because we've got restroom facilities there already, and then a perimeter walking trail. It's more big plan thinking, but we're hoping that we can leverage their dollars with some city infusion of dollars to launch the initial stages of that. But our plan right now is to not bring it back as a traditional swimming pool, but as a playground and a water playground as well.
Oh, okay, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Mrs. King?
Yes, sir, thank you. Will the youth activities increase the fee?
I'm sorry, say that one
Will
more.
any of the youth activities fees increase?
No, well, we have not addressed any fees in the budget yet, but currently, as we stand now, our fees will remain the same.
Thank you.
All right. Continue on.
How it fits in the enterprise, 1.58 FTEs. To give you an idea, we have 1 aquatic supervisor. It quantifies as 14 FTEs, but that's really close to about 70 seasonal employees between lifeguards, pool cashiers, and pool managers. 0.55% in the fund, 0.25% in the enterprise. Staffing, once again, 14 FTEs. That equates to 1 true full-time employee and upwards of 70 seasonal employees. Revenue budget, you can see just over 400,000 actual for 15-16. This year, we're estimating about 429,000. Next year, we're proposing about a $438,000 budget in terms of revenue. Reduction in revenues, often swim season impacted by rain. How many days can you swim? And then sometimes it may be impacted by the heat. It's too hot to swim. But also the YMCA, we've seen a little bit of an impact with their pool opening out there, so there's another operation locally for people to take advantage of. Expense budget, you can see in 15-16 we're just under $500,000 at $477,000. This year we're estimating to come in at about $475,000, and next year we're looking at being at $451,000.
Mr. Mayor,
Mr. Rivera?
what is, we're talking about just the water park, right?
This is the water park and Long Branch Park's included in this, yes, sir.
The water park per se, there's been some issue lately about repair that area there. What are the expenses in that water park per se, do you know off the head?
You're referencing what we anticipate the cost to repair it for next year?
This year?
Our decision paper we presented to the city managers for about $350,000 to replaster the surfaces of the pool, and do some pump room maintenance.
So out of this, I could subtract 350, and that will give me the rest is for the other area that you're talking about.
Wait, make
So
sure I
if you got
understand that.
350,000
Yes,
in expensive,
yes.
and this is your budget per se, I subtract 350,000, and the rest is Long Branch?
Let me answer that.
Okay.
The pool repairs, the $350 approximate $1,000 for the pool repairs are going to be in the capital projects plan that we show you. So
You move that one into
we're
that area?
going to move that out of the operating expense and make that a capital consideration, and we'll be covering the capital budget later in our budget talks.
No, makes sense.
Okay.
Thank you.
Explanation of the variance, see unfunded 2 FTEs, that's actually the equivalent of about 8 or 9 lifeguards, reduce hours of operation, and we're also going to create a maintenance day. Decision package is approved by city manager, $17,000 in police department funding. This actually covers multiple areas. This covers the Family Aquatic Center, Family Recreation Center, and it also covers fees associated with the annual Christmas parade and our Celebrate Killeen Festival. Decision package is disapproved by city manager. You'll see the $50,000 in pump room maintenance and the $300,000 in repair maintenance, but as just relayed by the city manager, that has been placed in the capital account. $43,000 in salaries that was reduced. That's going to result in us closing on Mondays and creating a maintenance day. And that's it. How will be managed in fiscal year 18. Stated before, we'll be closed on Monday, creating a maintenance day, and lap swimming will no longer be offered to the public prior to swim lessons.
Mr. Kilpatrick.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I noticed, the question I had, explore options for offering American Red Cross swim lessons. Bolera has been closed all summer. And one of the major reasons is they have no certified American Cross trained lifeguards. We require certified lifeguards.
Yes, sir.
Is that not a potential revenue source that we could enter into a partnership agreement with Fort Hood to, I know we had an AUSA board meeting last week, and a huge outcry was why have we allowed the, what can they do to help not allow the Bolera to have that activity open? And the MWR representative said, well, we have to find a way to get our lifeguards certified and trained. Did not we set that up, and then they partner with us to
Yes, sir.
okay.
We had a transition in our aquatic supervisor this year, our previous aquatic supervisor who's no longer with us, but our new supervisor is certified to conduct those trainings on behalf of American Red Cross, and that employee is also going to a training which will allow them to certify water safety instructors, who are the individuals who teach swim lessons. But what you'll see next year in some staff reorg that we're doing, that'll be a big class that we'll offer, that we'll try to get everybody in the region to come attend that class so they can get their certification, because that's what happens. It's a YMCA does their certifications, we do our certifications, but it's also a revenue source when you can reach out and grab Fort Hood. We have a meeting set up with Fort Hood within the next 30 days, I'm not sure the actual date, to talk to them about partnership opportunities, because we're actually wanting to host this water safety instructor training, which is a national program. We're wanting to host that on Fort Hood at Abrams because it takes place during the winter, and so we need a covered pool. And so we're hoping to enter into an agreement with them to do that at Abrams. And I think that will hopefully be the launching pad for a partnership with Fort Hood.
I knew y'all would already be proactive in that. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Top of it.
Mr. Mayor,
Mr. Rivera.
Mr. City Manager, I don't know if this is the right time to address this or not. I read in your proposal to outsource, maybe looking into the swimming area as well. If this is the right time to speak about it, or should I wait to another section that you may have in order to speak about this?
I'm not sure. We hadn't planned on talking more about it during the budget process.
So
but
really, it should not be the time right now. I should wait.
Probably not right now.
Okay,
but
I'll
but
wait.
I think when Brett does his evaluation of his department and so forth that he's talked about, I think that would be the time to,
Okay,
look at it in a
that's
little-
why I
in a
direct
little
the
bit
question
more
to you, sir.
detail.
Thank you.
right.
Could I just make a comment?
Mrs. Fleming.
I would just like to make a comment to Mr. Williams and thank him for allowing those classes this summer for the children. Got a lot of good comments about that, sir, and I want to thank you from the community that they were very pleased with what you did, offering those classes down at the community center, and I want to thank you as well.
I just want to say that goes directly to our Director of Volunteer Services,
Yeah.
Roxanne Akmat Flores.
Yes,
She
well, they did a
really-
great job. I just want to put this part of your program, too.
Man,
Thank you, sir.
Mr. Mayor, may I?
Mr. Rivera.
I just now that Ms. Fleming opened the thank you arena, let me thank you on behalf of one of the local church, what you do every year for the unfortunate kids out there that cannot make it over there, and you always make it possible for them one way or the other. I even heard sometimes you may have gone in your own pocket. I have no idea. But I really want to thank you for what you do for those kids, and I'm aware of every one of them that have come to me and said thank you. But they're not saying thank you to me, they're saying thank you to you, sir.
All right. Any other comments?
Just a couple of things, just for your information more than anything else. There were some proposals for increased fees in this area, which I think would probably be justified, but it's my general philosophy that we shouldn't be dealing with that kind of a decision when we're dealing with the biggest issues around the budget. I think we need to be talking about any kind of fee adjustments outside of the budget process, make our decision, and then apply them with the next budget. So that's what's happening there. Brett also recommended, because of the big repair numbers that came out this year, that we start a sinking fund with the aquatics park, and I think it's a great idea. I just don't think the timing is right for that to happen, and as we get our capital fund up and the capital planning working, I think we can start to build in that idea into our capital fund, and then decide whether we want to, how we want to fund that, either out of the general fund or some kind of a small increment of additional cost on each ticket sold or something like that that we can build into the capital fund. So we had a couple of good proposals here that I turned down for those reasons, but that doesn't mean they weren't good ideas and that we shouldn't deal with them. We should, but at a future time.
All right.
Good job.
Mr. Okray.
So you're saying, Mr. Olson, because you're saying a sinking fund, was this for the capital improvement that was proposed there?
Yes. We're looking at a $350,000 maintenance cost this year, and that's going to recur every I don't know how long.
Probably not.
Every 5 years, 7, 10 years, something, there's going to need to be some major repairs to that facility. And so what the recommendation was is that we start putting aside a little bit of money now so that we don't end up like we did this year, looking at a $350,000 bill with no money to pay for it. We start a sinking fund and start putting away a little money. So that's what the idea
We're
was.
talking sinking fund in terms of those expenses versus a capital.
Well, I think we could actually do the two together. I think we could build a dedicated revenue account inside of the capital fund for that one purpose.
Yeah, 'cause I'm thinking we talking about a sinking fund, you talking about going to a bond market to.
No.
Okay, we're talking about.
We're talking about cash.
Okay,
yeah.
thank you.
All right. Mr. Williams, I think you're done, right? Or you got more?
I wish.
He's about-
You're
he's
not
about
done.
halfway- He's about halfway through.
Oh,
Starting to
okay.
roll.
Big department.
All right, next is the golf course. Manage and maintain an 18-hole public golf course is the mission. Elements, maintain, youth instruction, adult instruction, and tournaments. By the numbers, 45,000 rounds of golf, 170 acres turf maintained, and 39 tournaments hosted this past year. Goals for 17-18, got to do a lot of retraining of our staff and adjust and maintain our efficiency related to the consolidation. What we're going to be doing this operation, we're going to consolidate our general manager position and our green superintendent position. We're going to be having a retirement effective October 1. When that occurs, we will not post that position and hire it again. We are going to transition our green superintendent to be our next general manager, but we're not going to hire another green superintendent. He is going to bear those duties in addition to the duties of the general manager as well. Then we're going to look for ways of potential revenue via our concession operations. We do have a beer license at the golf course now, and so we're looking at about $4,000 a month that we're seeing in revenue, but we're interested to see what that 12-month window is going to be in terms of sales. And then our concession operations, we went with the idea of outsourcing, but we're probably going to try to figure out if we can really make it profitable to do it in-house. And so those are going to be some of the things we'll look at for this fiscal year. Staffing, 1.87%, 16 FTEs in the general fund. In the enterprise, 1.5% of the fund, and 0.69% in the enterprise. Staffing levels, 16 FTEs. You can see in 18, there's an unfunded position that's currently filled, but it'll be funded through January 31st. We unfunded the principal secretary, and we also unfunded it says greenskeeper, but it's actually going to be a part-time position in the golf shop. Revenue, 15-16 actuals. You can see we're just over 1 million. We're estimating this year we're going to come in at about 1.1 million. We're proposing for 17-18. We think we'll just be just under 1.2 million in revenue. Explanation: added user fee. We added a user fee in the 16-17 budget, and then we also added green fees for non-pass holders. We increased the green fees, for non-pass holders. Also additional revenue due to alcohol sales, and then also a reduction in the budget target. You look at the expense budget, 15-16 we're at 1.4. Estimated actuals for 16-17 we're looking at 1.3, and we're looking at 17-18 being down to actually 1.2 for actual operating cost. Explanation: reorganization of the division to merge the general manager position with the superintendent, which I mentioned earlier, added cost of goods sold for alcohol sales, and also reduction in the budget target. There were no decision packages for this particular cost center. How we're going to be managed in 18, as I mentioned earlier, the reorg related to the retirement of the general manager and the movement of the golf superintendent.
Mr. Kilpatrick.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Is there any considerations to putting an enhanced snack bar or restaurant into the clubhouse for not only for convenience, but also as a revenue source?
Yes, sir. We've looked at that, and we had a proposal that we put out for bid, and it would have resulted in about $24,000 a year in revenue. I've had some discussions with some outside agencies, and I have information that leads me to believe that I think we can double that if we can figure out a way to do it in-house, an efficient way to do it. I think there's more revenue to be made if we do it in-house versus outsourcing. There's going to be a lot of startup costs that the outsourced agency would have to incur, and they're going to want to get that back in terms of free rent. That's what we negotiated with 3 vendors, and we could not finalize a deal, and it was just because they were scared of their upfront costs, and then the fluctuations, and if you're a golfer, the patterns in terms of when golfers are there, and we want someone who's there every day, and so if we have 5 people to show up to golf on a rainy day, well, we still want them to be able to have concessions. Well, that particular business, they don't want to open on that day because it's just a loss for them, and so that's one of the dilemmas we have there, because if we do get an entity in there, it needs to be someone who has a following as such that people come there not just because they're golfers, but because they're fans of the restaurant, and ideally that's what we'd like. We'd love to have it that folks from the Willows are walking over there to eat, that you're going to have luncheons there, not because you're a golfer, but because it's a quality place to get food, and we just have not been able to get that person in place yet.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
How do we compare as far as our fees and our prices? Because I know you mentioned that we have about 45,000 rounds. That's quite a bit. And are our fees still reasonable? Do we have room to grow that? Because
We're at about 10% market penetration, which they say is actually excellent for the golf industry. We're definitely at the top of the scale. We're close to being to the point where we'll start pushing people to Clear Creek and pushing people to Temple. To brag on our staff out there, nothing that I do. There's just some really good people out there. Just head and shoulders, we're just better than everyone else. And our rate is higher than everyone else's.
yeah, because I divided that up. That's like 130 rounds a day. That's a lot.
Just depends on, I mean, tournaments are going to inflate that because, you know,
Yeah.
when you have a tournament, you're going to have 200 golfers out there, so you have 200 rounds, and when you have that 39 times a year, it really boosts that number up. But, I mean, there's a lot of golf played out there.
I think if you have to raise prices, you just have to say we're a luxury, you know, we're a luxury golf course.
Mr. Mayor?
Yes, sir.
Mr. Rivera, you don't play golf.
No, that's not it. I do play golf, or I pretend to do so. How's that sound? I just pretend. When you talk about we the highest fee in the market, but we are the best club in the market also as well. Because if you go to Temple, Salado, even all the way down to Burnett, Lampasa, Copper's Cove, those fields used to be incredible, that green. Now you go there, it's so dry, they're not well maintained. And our golf course still one of the top one in Central Texas. By the way, some people, sometimes they get confused about if this is a private or a municipal golf course. So, you know, I'm proud of the golf course that we have in Killeen. So those fees really represent what we got.
I can tell you one of the best things this city did was the reuse water project. Water is the resource that everyone needs. That's what causes courses to go away. Well, we've got reuse water, so we don't take away from our potable water source every day. We're using reuse water, and we're getting it at an unbelievable rate.
And 2 weeks ago, I was in Sun City real quick. Sun City is the only place that I could compare our golf course with them. That's the only place, and it's a very private place up there. So Sun City is the only one that I could see that really could compare to us, and they're not as big as ours anyway.
We've got a good operation. We're really blessed with the team we have out there. We've got some sharp people.
All right, continue on.
Community services, we got the Killeen Community Center. Mission is to enhance quality of life by providing facility for programs, recreation, special services, education, self-help for citizens of all ages. You can see the mission elements: public access to gym space free of charge and affordable public access to meeting rooms. By the numbers, 30 hours per week of open gym, which we think is very important, and public meeting space. We just hit 1 year of renovating that facility and over 1,200 paid reservations in a facility that traditionally never had a fee structure that we just adopted last year with the renovation. So obviously we think the public has been satisfied with it and think it's reasonable. Goals for 17-18, staffing methods that will allow us to continue to function. We've got some challenges. We're going to review our instructor contracts to see if there's potential for increased revenue. Traditionally, we do an instructor contract. It's 80-20 split. The instructor gets 80%. The city receives 20%. We're going to look at what we're offering and see if maybe we can make that 70-30 and see if there's an opportunity for increased revenue in that area. FTEs, there's 2 employees. That's a reduction. It was previously 3. It's reduced to 2. Fits in the enterprise, 0.16% in the general fund, Part B, and 0.07 in the enterprise. Staffing, you can see a reduction down to 2 employees. We unfunded a recreation assistant position to get within budget cap. Revenue budget, you can see 15-16 was 29,000. Estimated actuals, we're thinking this year is going to be close to 50,000, and then next year we're thinking it'll be around 55,000. Slight increase in revenues from facility reservations. Like I said, we're 1 year in to actually having a fee structure in place at the Killeen Community Center. Expense budget, 15-16 was 94,000. This year, we're estimated actual is 147,000, and we're projecting next year we're proposing 129,000. And you can see we unfunded a recreation assistant position and reduction in the budget target. Decision packages approved. We have none. Disapproved. We did not fund a recreation assistant position at the community center, and you can see the impact of that. How they'll be managed in fiscal year 18. Hours of operation, you see the current hours are 8 a.m. to 9 p.m. Monday through Friday, and 8 a.m. to 4 p.m. on Saturday. We're proposing with the reduction in staff that we're going to close on Mondays, and we'll be open from noon to 8 Tuesday through Friday, and Saturdays will be open from noon to 4.
Do you have much activities in the morning?
That was when you had to make a decision on where the majority of the activities are. It's geared toward the afternoon as opposed to the morning. It's going to compromise someone, and the greatest compromise would have been in the afternoon.
Mr. Okry.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Mr. City Manager, in proportion of what the center is generating in revenue, what's the logic behind the position? Is the community center not generating revenue?
It is generating revenue, but we still have to cut back the total expenses. So I don't think we're going to be compromising revenue on this very much.
Won't be very much. The cut in this area, there's the building, there's the utilities and fees, and then there's staff. And it was pretty cut and dry decision. I will tell you this as part of, we said how we're going to audit all of our operations. We've been moving bodies like musical chairs, and so we're going to work our way through this process, but we're working on trying to figure out ways that we can still, because this is, I don't like this, this is a tough pill to swallow, but we've got to do what we've got to do to get in compliance, and then we've got to figure out ways to get creative so we can give back what everybody deserves.
So who's generating revenue? Who's not generating? Who's in the red? Who's in the black? If it seems to me that if we're in the black and generating revenue,
We shouldn't be cutting it.
we shouldn't be cutting it.
Yeah, and I don't think that's the case, but the question's a good one, and I'm not confident in the answer. So let me do that and get back to you on the next session.
Thank you.
I saw Mr. Kilpatrick. Hold on. Go ahead, Mr. Kilpatrick.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I want to tag in on that because if this is yearly proposal, it's going to impact the summer where we have free classes, because most all of those free classes start at 8 a.m., 9 a.m. And by 1, at the latest 2, they're gone. I mean, it's not there. So I understand the budgetary process and everything, but we just gave great accolades because we had this great summer program to help things, and we believe that next year it would even be better and more attendance. So I would just ask City Manager to look at that potentially for, I understand the cutting the hours, but maybe in the summer, a reevaluation could be to look at that and say, for programs that would need it, and they would not generate revenue. That's one of those things we look at. There's potential that we might have nonprofits come in and pick up some revenue for that, what we're working toward. But I would ask that we really look at that. Thank you, Mr. Mayor, City Manager.
Mrs. King.
That was my concern, the youth activities for the summer, and to ask the city manager would he consider adjusting the hours for the youth in the summer, because that was one of the concerns from residents that had come, I guess last month or the month before last, that we as the city should have more youth activities during the summertime. So if you would please just look into that.
I will certainly look at it again.
Thank you.
Now, keep in mind how difficult these decisions are to make when we're trying to balance the budget, and understand the general process that we went through. When we looked at our total revenue and we divided that out proportionately to the various departments, what I did was ask the department heads to meet their budget target with the least negative impact as possible in their budgets. So the questions you're raising are important. I'll go back and double check this one.
Because the community center is a cornerstone for this community. That is it. That is the hangout. That's where we go ever since I've been here for the last 20 years. And that's where youth like to be in the summer. Just a place to get out the house.
All right.
In which,
Mr. Rivera?
I want to piggyback on everyone, maybe one or two questions. We are getting revenue, but my question is, are we breaking even?
no, sir. No, we're not in the black.
How? So we're not breaking even.
No, sir.
So that comes from the question, how short are we, if you know, to break even?
As currently proposed, about $75,000 is the break-even point.
Okay, I could take it from there. Thank you.
Mr. Kilpatrick?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and just to follow up on it, understand that you're going to say, I understand the hard decisions, but it does then, it's good that we had this knowledge up front, and we really appreciate that, because then we have some things working within the community that we would entertain that if that did work out, then we would entertain that there would be maybe a fee structure in the morning. It would be still free to the attendees, but we'd try to find a resource of monies in the private sector to budget for that. It would keep y'all then, not only that, but try to draw that closer, where 55,000 minus that 75,000, maybe we could draw enough revenue in, and it'd be a win-win situation where y'all could provide your services, and we still provide the activities for the youth. But it'll take a lot of hard work, but that's all I ask for, to be entertained in looking at that. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
All right.
Mayor, and on
Yes, sir.
that same note, and you'll see the Director of Volunteer Services oversees the Killeen Community Center and our two senior centers, and you'll see when we get to that presentation, we talk about leveraging, community partnership and volunteer opportunities. That's how we would try to backfill to work that, because they'll still be in the building, but this plan is based on the hours that she knows are available. You just go, these are hours, and it's a pretty simple method. But you'll see that we are going to try to work partnerships, and that's how we intend to expand our programs, through partnerships,
Yeah.
outside partnerships. And so program that Mayor Pro Tem was referencing, those are the type of partnerships that would allow us potentially to be open early in the morning, because we would still have a staff member there if it's the Director of Volunteer Services, but then it'd be the volunteer-based group that would be there that would allow those programs to take place.
All right.
Or Lions Club Park. At Lions Club Park operations, this is what most people know as the Family Recreation Center. Mission is to operate the Family Recreation Center. Basic elements, fitness center, and recreation programming, also keeping in mind that all of our youth sports, volleyball, basketball, are played within this facility. By the numbers, annual pass holders, paying members to the Recreation Center, 356. Day passes sold. These are people who don't have memberships but just want to purchase a simple day pass, 19,000. Visits, membership visits, just over 100,000. And then a key number just at the bottom that I'd like to hit on. You see that 900,000 number, and you think that sounds a lot. That sounds, obnoxious, but that actually is in a proven methodology in terms of the number of visits that we get through all of our youth programs for practices, games, and then all of our fitness members as well. Goals for 17-18, leverage supervision resources of our athletics and recreation. We're looking at consolidating them to be a more efficient operation. And we're going to also look at offering some indoor sports, and you'll see those listed on there, soccer and adding a youth basketball program. How we fit in the In the fund, FTEs, you'll see 7.5. As we look at the enterprise, 0.57, pardon me, of the fund, and 0.26 in the enterprise. Staffing, you can see that number go 15 down to 7.5. You can see we unfunded a custodian in this budget. We transferred out the 3 admin positions. We also unfunded a full-time counter worker and then a part-time counter position. Then we moved a recreation supervisor into the proper account. Then we transferred another part-time position to the senior center to provide coverage over there from when we unfunded the senior manager in 16-17. So a lot of moving parts. Revenue, you can see 15-16 at $447,000. Estimated for this year, we're looking at about $500,000. And we're proposing about $415,000 for next year. Then you say why the decrease. There's just numerous gyms that are opening in the area. 10 years, May of 2018 will be 10 years that the facility opened. Our fee structures remained pretty much consistent the entire time. We came in way below the market, and we pretty much dragged everybody down to us. And so now everyone comes in at our level, so it's a pretty fierce competition out there for the memberships, but we're still at a pretty good rate, we feel. Expense budget, you can see in 15-16 at about $760,000. Estimating this year coming in at about the same rate. With all the cleanups, the transfers, and the unfunds, you can see we're looking at being at about $472,000 for 17-18. Explanation, at all the staff that I referenced earlier, the administration staff, the recreation staff, and the unfunded positions, we're proposing a reduction in our fitness classes, which are offered to, they're free fitness classes, but they're offered to paying members. Decision package is approved by the city manager, none. Disapproved by the city manager. We reduced our fitness class account by just under $14,000. That's going to cut our free classes in half, roughly. And we'd proposed a revenue capital account similar to what the city manager referenced at the Aquatic Center as well.
Any questions?
How the department will be managed in 18, pardon me, Mayor, fewer fitness classes
Mr. Oakley.
offered to members.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. How much are we spending to cut grass?
To cut grass.
Budget is going to be, in Parks and Public Grounds, about $2 million.
That is ridiculous. $2 million to cut grass. Now, this is from last budget cycle, which should have been included in this one. $2 million. That right there is ripe for contracting, I believe. $2 million to cut grass.
Maybe that's something that, I think we've talked about it before. Every year, it's always the same thing about our grass and where it is, so I think.
That along with, in these areas where we might need to get a horticulturist or somebody in here to get something to push some daisies up or some sunflowers or whatever, where we don't have to cut as much.
Yeah.
$2 million to cut grass.
It's expensive. We got a lot of grass out there.
And
I
we
can tell you
talking
that.
about that. We talking about salaries and all of that that's in there too.
Yeah. Mrs. King.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Mr. Williams, if we do contract out, how many people will lose their jobs?
Which
If
area are you referencing?
cutting grass personnel?
We have
Because that should always be a concern.
35 FTEs in Parks and Public Grounds.
And we need to take that under consideration. I know that's $2 million for grass, but 35 people will lose their job. So I think they're doing a good job.
Yeah. All right. Continue on.
Parks.
Mr. Williams, you have 12 or 11 divisions?
11.
11. Because I just noticed, it's just a little typo. It says the Community Service Department is comprised of 12 divisions.
It is. We consolidate cemetery under Parks and Public Grounds, so
Okay.
that would be the 12.
Okay.
All right, Parks and Public Grounds and Cemetery. Last year, we unfunded a cemetery superintendent following a retirement, and so we just consolidated our cemetery operations under Parks and Public Grounds. Mission is to maintain parks, public grounds, and athletic fields to enhance quality of life for our citizens. Mission elements, grass within parks, public parks and cemetery, also all of our public grounds, places such as City Hall, and then maintain our athletic fields. By the numbers, acres maintained, just over 1,000, acres mowed weekly, just under 800, bi-weekly about 134. And to give you an idea, 22 athletic fields, which we maintain, 21 parks, and 3 trails. Goals for 17-18, consolidate crews to allow for the timely completion of work with the reduction of staff. How they fit within the fund, 35 FTEs. Within the enterprise, overall 2.4%. I'm sorry, I keep saying 2.4% within the fund, 1.1% in the enterprise. Staffing, 15-16, we're at 41 FTEs, and we're proposing for 17-18 at 35. You can see in fiscal year 17, we unfunded 5 grounds maintenance worker positions. In 18, we're unfunding an additional position. Revenue, this is basically fees collected from plot sales at the cemetery. You can see pretty much remaining consistent at about 50,000 this year. We're estimating we're going to have a little dip down to 35,000. This will be one dip in revenue you'll never hear me complain about. So, but next year we're projecting about 52,000. And the increase, last year this body authorized an increase in fees for plots at the cemetery. The expense budget was about $2.1 million in 15-16. In 16-17, 1.9. In 17-18, you're seeing the $2 million. Keep in mind that we've consolidated parks and public grounds and the cemetery in one cost center. Explanation. And here you'll see eliminated support. And I can tell you this is actually not accurate. We at one point in time were considering eliminating additional positions, which were going to prevent us from being able to provide some of the support. But with the reduction down to 1, we will be able to support Holiday Under the Stars, Celebrate, and our various recreation events. Not to the extent that we have always done, but not to the point where anyone will notice a difference in the public. Decision packages, we had sought some additional overtime, which was not approved.
Questions? Mr. Harris?
See, I was going to go back to Councilman O'Crea's comment about, this is a question about if you outsource something like this, and let's see, I understand his point of view is possibly saving, and I understand Councilwoman Nash's as well, but I'll ask the question, if outsourcing was looked at, would it try to be negotiated, of course, that employees would try to negotiate something that employees would be hired on by the other company if something like that happened, or would you just say outsource and do what you want to do?
That would be a part of the negotiations that would take place between the city, and that would have to be written into the specs in terms of a bid that we'd put out. And in some cases, I've been told that's commonplace for an agency to come in, and they know in order to be successful, they need the institutional knowledge of the folks that have been there. So often those very same employees are maintained, and they keep moving, and there could be some changes here and there, but very seldom, based on the information I've received, do they come in and everyone disappears who's been there for several years.
Okay, 'cause I just wanted to mean, because like I said, it would be of course, a hard decision to look at, outsourcing, and because we got to save money, we got to cut back. And if just wanted to make sure if that was something that did come up to the table, that our employees would still have some security, if you will, that they would still be working and doing things like that. But yeah, thank you, sir.
Never no guarantees, so.
Exactly, I know. Yep, thank you.
Mrs. Fleming?
Again, I'm going to piggyback on what everybody said about the mowing. We have discussed about this mowing so many times, and then we discussed it also with the people, with the department that's in charge of it, and also with only 35 employees, whoever would negotiate within this to outsource this. they should be able to pull every employee in, and, you know, if the negotiation would go right, and we would have to be within that negotiation period to make sure that everyone that's working and mowing will be guaranteed they would have their job. But where you are mowing is vitally important. Are you mowing both cemeteries, the city and the one out? You only mow one?
We do the city cemetery,
You're not doing the one out?
the state.
Oh, okay, that's the state cemetery, I forgot about that, I'm military, I forgot about that. Anyway, so you're doing the one here in Killeen, and after looking at the structure, most of those mowings is justified, though.
Well, one of the things, and we've had the discussions on mowing, one of the important things to keep in mind that, like, say, our baseball program and our softball program and our flag football and our soccer, we have to prepare those fields every day. It's not mowing, that's
I know.
That's a different level of,
Yeah.
that's not just knock the grass down mowing, that's
Right.
lining fields. If we have rain, and sometimes we're successful in
Yes.
recovering, and sometimes we fail, but if we have rain and we've got to get those fields ready, those are some things that we have to overcome if we were to contract out, because the contractor's probably going to cut grass. He's not going to maintain dirt
Right.
and chalk it. So, I mean, I'm not gonna say anything's possible, I mean, but there'd be some things we'd have to definitely make sure we'd
But you
address.
might want to consider putting that on the agenda, maybe discuss it and, you know, a little bit more, because this has been brought up several times. Last year, remember, Mr. Mayor, we brought it up and talked about, Mr. Oakley brought it up about, you know, the millions of dollars. We've met with the mowing people, and still we haven't gotten nothing.
It's always, because there's so many integral parts in that, and it, on the surface, it looks easy, but like I say, it's so much that goes into it. It's not just mowing, and when you put all that together, it might end up costing us a lot more than what we're paying now. So, but Mr. Olson has a comment on that.
Well, I do want to say, I'm certainly not opposed to looking at any kind of outsourcing and privatization. I'm kind of the king of doing that. I've done it just about every place I've been. And because I've had that kind of experience, I want to tampen down your expectations just a little bit. It's been my experience that you don't save that much money by outsourcing mowing. And when you get to that point, I doubt very much that you're going to find one vendor that will mow that much grass. That is a lot of grass. What was it? Just short of 2,000 acres that we maintain,
1,000,
and you mow it, I don't know.
700 weekly.
Okay, so you mow 1,000 acres a week, and then you mow another 1,000 acres every other week, and you're talking about a lot of mowing, and you're talking about multiple vendors, and I just haven't seen a great deal of savings by contracting that out. $2 million is a lot of money, but look at the work that's being done there. It's huge.
It is.
And these guys that we're paying them $9 an hour to do this work. I mean, again, I think we can look at it, but I think you ought to re-examine your expectations, because I'm not sure it's going to yield what you think it might yield.
I think we need to be satisfied with what we got and move on, because it is I wasn't finished. And move on, because I think we have a good deal here, $2 million. And if you get, say, somebody private, they charge it $100 to just cut grass, just one person's grass. So if you look at all the grass that you all cutting, I think we got a good deal. I really do.
Yeah.
And it's justifiable, I think.
Mr. Kilpatrick.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Taking on Councilwoman Fleming's lead, I'm moving on. We were briefed last year, the potential of revenue from sale of land to a developer immediately to the east of the cemetery. That we did not need as many acreages now due to the fact of the open availability of the Texas Land Vet. I don't see, so is that not projected for 18, any sale of property there?
No, we don't know of anything that's imminent there. And then the other issue that I think we got to decide what we're going to do with any revenue that we get. I know in the past there's been discussion about selling property and putting it into the general fund for operations. And I just think from a financial policy standpoint, that may not be the best policy. you've spent capital money to buy property, and if you sell it, it seems to me that it ought to go back into the capital fund for another type of capital asset. So if we think about selling our assets for operations, I think that's the wrong policy. I think that's the wrong direction.
I'm in agreement because I've said it last year, said it twice, I'll say it again. We sell property from the cemetery, then a capital improvement program should be done for that cemetery to build a stone wall around it to provide the peace and dignity and sanctity of that where our forefathers and foremothers are buried, and their families can go in peace rather than to face all of the rancier traffic and any development to the east traffic. We did that basically with the Vet Land Cemetery by making it a cemetery district, and we've controlled the type of businesses that can go across the street, around it, and through it and everything. We lost the bubble 30 years ago on City of Killeen Cemetery when we did not do that. And therefore, what monies that we would get from 5-acre, 12-acre sales, I still would propose to the council to really look at that as a policy that would go back into a capital improvement for that cemetery, which is the City of Killeen Cemetery.
Yeah, the piece of property, that happened like a couple of years ago, and that's already transacted, so I don't think you'll see that, because that's,
Well, last year we got a briefing that they wanted an additional,
yeah,
I think, 13 acres.
if
to do
necessary.
that development.
But I don't think it ever panned out, because,
And, yes,
Mr.
Mr.
Oakley.
Mayor, and I agree. So I didn't see any potential
yeah.
revenue here, but I'm still going to bring that up every opportunity I get my chance to, legally, within the confines of the attorney.
All right.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Okay, Mr. Okray.
Yep. Mr. Olson, this is not a showstopper for me. This, we're talking about grass. I didn't mean to light a grass fire. But what I'm looking at in terms of, we're talking about people that are the employees, people that are on salary, people that are drawing benefits over the long term. And we're talking about maintaining, was 1,000, 2,000 acres for what is that, $2 million for 2,000 acres? What is that per acre that we're talking about? So from this, I'm looking at, I'm just to be blunt and honest with you, I'm not here to keep people employed. I am here to ensure that the essential services are delivered to the residents and ratepayers of this city at an efficient and effective way.
Efficiency.
Yes. So if it's something that we might be better off doing, that cost is going to go up as people get older. If there's a position for potential for upward mobility or whatever, with a contract you get a price,
Yeah.
and everything's got to come into that, into that, whatever. If it's $2 million for that, it might be 2.2, 2.3, but we're talking about down the road. You ain't doing it every year. $1,000 an acre.
$1,000 an acre.
Yep.
So that's about, 4 houses on a street block, relatively speaking. Not, you were talking other things, you were talking about sand and other things, but that, I'm not really interested in keeping people employed for the sake of keeping them employed, because we don't, our budget right now, or the money that we have available, I'm just looking at ways, $2 million just seemed like a lot. That seemed like a lot of summer jobs for some kids to cut grass. Seems like a lot. Thank you.
Mr. Olson?
I tend to agree with Mr. Okray. I think it comes down to a business decision more than anything else, and I think we gotta figure out which way is the cheapest way to go. And we're gonna have to put more energy into it than we've done so far. I'm gonna have to. I mean, we haven't looked at that. And I think it's worth looking at. We ought to know the difference.
Something that we can put in some kind of future agenda here.
Well, and maybe it's just a matter of staff work. Maybe it's just a matter as a staff, we've got to do enough homework
And,
that we
and,
know what
and
we're
like I
talking
say, if you look on the surface, it looks easy because, you're just looking at grass cutter, but, based on my experience in real estate, and I live in an HOA, and we outsource, and the challenge with outsourcing and finding people, it's such a low-paying job that it never gets done on time because it's just one of those things that, they're just going to do whenever they can. And it's like you write contracts, 'cause I got contracts with a bunch of people, and I can't find them all the time. And it's like, where are they at? Well, my last grass cutter, I think he hired some illegals because they're gone. I haven't seen saved money, so. I saw Mr. Rivera's hand before yours. Mr. Rivera.
Raising my hand all afternoon, I just want to say is, a couple of topics back that we said any outsource, we discussed it in another section. This is very important. And it's going to create more issues about this. This should be discussed in a workshop and bring it to the
Yeah.
table, because now we're going to be here running around, and I want to get back to this.
Let's do it. Good comment. All right. Mr. Williams, I think it's back to you, because I saw Mrs. King put her hand down, right?
Next here is our Recreation Division, and that's to provide diverse and inclusive recreational events and programs for the community. Things such as 5K programs, daddy-daughter dance, mother-daughter sleepover, things of that nature. Provide recreation events and recreation programs. By the numbers, we do 8 special events per year, and also community celebrations, National Parks and Recreation Month, Celebrate Killeen Festival, Holiday Under the Stars, things along that line. Goals for 17-18, mentioned earlier, consolidating athletics and recreation, and look at our fee structures for our special events to make sure they're fiscally sound. 3 employees in the fund, 0.23% in the enterprise. 0.28% of the fund, 0.13 in the enterprise. Staffing, it's been 2 employees. It reflects 3 just because it was a cost center switch. The employee was in a different cost center and relocated them to the proper cost center. Revenue, $25,000 in 15-16, estimating $26,000 this year, proposing $26,000 for next year. Expense budget, just under $200,000 in 15-16, and you can see next year $232,000. The increase basically associated to the position that was transferred to this particular budget. Explanation, you'll see the moving of the position, what we've eliminated. A part of our runs, we do this medal that you get for every run that you put together at the end. We've eliminated that. Our Halloween Carnival is currently eliminated, and our Easter event has also been unfunded as we currently stand. Decision packages approved, none. Disapproved, you'll see the medal for the 5K runs, which is a part of the Syntex Race Series. The Halloween Carnival on here at $17,000, and also the Easter Carnival at $8,000. 2 things I want to touch on here, because these are 2, I think, pretty important events in the community, the Halloween Carnival and the Easter Carnival. We're currently working with a outside agency that will come in and host an Easter event, and which will have us provide some support for it, but will come to us at a significantly reduced cost to offer that event. And on the Halloween Carnival, we're going to see where we get in budget. I'm just not sold on that we can't do that event, and so we may have to do some shuffling within our budget based on some discretion from the city manager to figure out how we may be able to do something along those lines. How the department will be managed in fiscal year 18, the emphasis is going to be placed on sustainability. We got to create things that we know that they can sustain themselves, and that's just got to be the way going forward.
All right. I think this is going to be our last one, so anybody have any questions? Because we had to go across the street. We got about 15 minutes, but before we end, anybody got any questions for Mr. Williams? Are you going to make it?
Yep. Oh, yeah. We're going to make it.
Okay.
Seniors.
That's me.
You better talk fast.
All right, we got seniors here. Provide facilities, wellness, education, and social classes for our seniors. You'll see social programs, wellness programs, as well as educational opportunities. Annual events, 110 events hosted within 2 buildings, Bob Gilmore and Lions Club Park Senior. Meals served, big part of what we do is our meal plan that we do at the senior centers. Over 16,000 meals served between those 2 facilities. Our goals for 17-18, increase our volunteer participation to ensure our programs can remain cost effective. And then also leverage the resources of our senior council and our senior advisory board to increase programs with minimal impact on staff resources and funds. And this goes back to what we talked about earlier about how we can expand services at the community center as well. 3.5 employees is what you have. 0.22% in the fund, 0.1% in the overall enterprise. Staffing, you can see 3.5. We transferred a position from Lions Club Park over to help provide coverage from where the senior center manager was eliminated. Revenue, no revenue. We just have a lot of good times. Expenses, you can see we're at $238,000 in 15-16. We're proposing in 17-18 to be at $182,000 for our 2 senior centers. Explanation, moved part-time position from Lions Club Park, which I mentioned earlier, and also the unfunding of the senior center manager. Decision packages. Disapproved, you can see the construction of the new senior center at $1.6 million for a new Gilmore Center. Got one more, Mayor.
All right, I got a few more minutes.
Got one more. You
Go ahead.
Keep going. All right, next up we got volunteer services. All right, the mission is to mobilize people and resources to address community needs through volunteerism. You'll see the org chart of the program committees under KVI, Celebrate Killeen, Keep Killeen Beautiful, Youth Advisory, and Volunteer Killeen. Elements, let's recruit volunteers, let's use them constructively, and then let's celebrate their contributions to our community. By the numbers, what I really want to highlight is the monetary savings, just about $2.8 million based on service that they give to this community. Community service events from Make a Difference Day, Holiday Under the Stars, over 150 events that they churn out over there in that operation. Goals for 17-18, program committees will play an increased role in accomplishing events with reductions in manpower, and then programs will grow through partnerships with civic agencies, and this is what we talked about, how we would overcome the shortfall of staffing at the community center. Keeping in mind, the Director of Volunteer Services is over the Killeen Community Center, so it's really one umbrella in those operations. Employees, there's 3 employees in volunteer services, and then they're 0.20% in the fund and 0.09% in the enterprise, consistently at 3 employees for the last 5 years probably. Revenue, we just have funds, so we spend about $161,000, and that's what you'll see again on that slide right there. Explanation, Director of Volunteer in the expense variance, the Director of Volunteer Services and a Senior Secretary were reclassified in 17-18. What we did is I consolidated the Killeen Community Center, the Senior Center, and Volunteer Services together, so we reclassified those employees to compensate them for the added responsibilities. And decision packages?
All right. We're not going to have time for questions, so we got to head over across the street for our council meeting, so don't hang out too much because we're going to start at 5 o'clock there. So with that, we are recessed.
I have a question when we come back. Heard back there laughing.
All right, we're going to go ahead and get started. We're only missing now just one, Mr. Rivera. So we'll call this meeting back to order, and Mr. Locke, I guess you're up.
Thank you again, Mayor and City Council. This is the presentation for the Finance Department. This also includes the Division of Purchasing. The Finance Department's mission is to support city departments by providing financial services which maintain the fiscal integrity of the city in a transparent manner. The mission elements of the Finance Department are to maintain accounting records for receipts, disbursements, and inventories, prepare financial reports, monitor fiscal and performance compliance, administer centralized treasury for debt, cash, and investment management, and administer the purchasing and procurement system. Some of the numbers associated with our mission elements is we had a total of a little over 11,000 vendor payments last fiscal year and monitored 16,000 P-card transactions. Under preparing financial reports, the city successfully created a financial transparency portal that citizens can go on and see the historical operational data of the city. And the compilation of the comprehensive annual financial report was transitioned to finance from the city auditor's office in fiscal year 2016. In terms of how we're doing with the centralized treasury for investment management, our total rate of return in FY16 was 48 basis points. FY16 was, rates were still extremely low. Our return has come up quite a bit since FY16. And our benchmark that we use is TexPool, which is a pooled fund that a lot of cities use, was 31 basis points. Our goals for next fiscal year include establishing financial management policies, and this is the umbrella policy that Mr. Olson has already referred to that he would like to bring to you as soon as the budget is adopted. Build an account structure that facilitates financial reporting by mission element. That's all the mission elements that the city, that all the departments are sharing with you. We'd like to set up our budget in a way that will track the expenses associated with each of those mission elements. Create funds to help the city achieve long-term goals, and the proposed budget does include that with the creation of a CIP fund. Automate the purchase order and budget transfer process. This is an internal efficiency that we'd like to achieve with the assistance of IT. Achieve the Texas Transparency Star, and provide timely financial reports for departments. Finance is 1.7% of FTEs in the general fund and 1.25% in the enterprise. I'd like to be able to say that it's coincidental that the numbers read the same for budget, and I'll give you the actual numbers as an oversight on our part. The for budget, finance is 1.72% in the general fund and 0.78% in the enterprise. Staffing, we're at 18 the past 2 fiscal years. This proposed budget includes 16 FTEs with a business analyst and accounting specialist position being unfunded. In terms of a revenue budget, the only revenue source that finance brings in is the P-card rebates that the city receives, as well as rebates associated with the SpendNet payable program, which is the virtual card program that City Council recently authorized. And that is the reason for the increase in revenue from the 16-17 to the 17-18 fiscal year. All the rest of the funding comes from the general fund to cover our total budget of $1.4 million. The explanation I just shared with you. Most of finance expenses are related to personnel. We do have some materials and supplies and contracts. If you look at contracts, and it seems like there's a big decrease from 16-17 to 17-18. There is a decrease that is more related to moving the Bell County Appraisal District out of the finance budget and into a non-departmental where it's more appropriate for that expense to be. One of the largest contracts included in finance contract budget is the EMS billing contract that we have with the outside vendor. That's around $180,000. And again, the explanation for the expense variance, moving the tax appraisal district and the 2 unfunded positions. There were no approved decision packages and 2 disapproved decision packages that were both related to requesting to fill a position. And that's all.
Any questions for Mr. Locke? You're let off easy. Mr. Johnson,
I have a question.
never mind. I take that. Spoke too soon.
Did the city ever figure out a solution to ensuring KPD is properly reimbursed? Do you remember that situation?
For overtime?
For services they provide for like quality of life events and Christmas parades and to that sort?
If a department would like the services of the police department, and the police department hasn't already incorporated that particular event into their overtime budget, there is a process where internally we can have that department cover the expense for the police department so that the police department's budget isn't absorbing the expense, for that particular event.
Right.
Yes,
Okay.
sir.
All right, thank you.
Yeah, and there was a part earlier in the parks that had budgeted for that for the police department when we do our activities and stuff like that. So they had allocated some money for that too. All right, thank you. All right, who's next? The fire department. Chief Rank, welcome.
Mayor, Council, the mission for the fire department is, the Killeen Fire Department's mission is to save lives and property through fire protection, emergency medical services, and rescue services. Very, very straightforward. The mission elements are responding to fires, EMS calls, and calls for service of various types. We conduct fire prevention activities, education, investigations, and inspections. We review plans for code compliance, fire code compliance, and we conduct emergency management planning, response, mitigation, and recovery. By the numbers, responding to EMS and fire calls and calls for service, 25,436 calls for service a year. The Fire Prevention Bureau conducts public education to about 18,000 people per year. That's mostly the children in the school district, and we also do some other classes for fire extinguishers and safety classes. We do about 1,000 inspections a year, and we've done 118 arson investigations this year. For plans review compliance, there was 256 plans reviewed. That's an indicator of economic activity in the city of Killeen. Every time someone starts a new business, they ask us to review the plans, so that's a good number. And through the Emergency Management Division, Response, Mitigation, Recovery, we reach over 50% of the citizens, and there's 31 CERT team members, which are volunteers that help the Killeen Fire Department. Our goals for the year are to replace 2 ambulances, replace 2 emergency response staff units, and we hope to complete an emergency services master plan, which will help us to plan for the future with regard to economic growth and population growth, so that we know where to put fire stations and what equipment and personnel that we need. And we need to conduct a new ISO study because we haven't had one since 2003. So there's a new schedule with regard to how the ISO is graded. So we don't know, we need to have a professional come in and help us with the grading schedule. Staffing is 26% of the general fund, 237 personnel, and it's 18% of the enterprise. Sorry, staffing. Make sure my clicker's working. And of the enterprise, we're 25% of the expenses for the general fund, and we're 11% of the expenses for the enterprise. As far as the full-time employees, you can see that from 15-16, we're at 2001. We brought these safer people on board. There was 37 of those. We went up to 238, and then we reduced down to 1 by unfunding a deputy chief's position down to 237. The revenue budget side, If you look at the 3.5 million, that's the EMS billing that we do, plus any fees that we generate through the Fire Prevention Office and some fees that come in through the Fire Academy. We have grants that are the SAFER grant and the AFG grant. The reason you see a difference in the number that drops from 16, 17 down to 17, 18 is because some of those grants are coming to the end of their performance period. So there'll be less of those grants available in the 17, 18 budget. So the overall contribution from the general fund is $15,458,806, which leaves our annual budget at $20,533,000 plus a decision package, which we'll talk about in a minute. The differences I just discussed, that was a SAFER grant and the AFG grant. And on the expense side of the budget, we have to have matching numbers, so we have a balance sheet, so we end up with an end result of $20,533,000, which matches the revenue side so that we have a balanced budget. The differences in the contracts that you see right there are some renegotiation of contracts to try to lower those numbers down. The difference between the 16-17 budget on personnel services and the proposed budget in 17-18 is the difference in overtime primarily, plus the one deputy chief's position. And the differences in supplies and material has to do with taking some money out of our operating accounts. The next slide represents the decrease in the overtime budget, the deputy chief position that was unfunded, and the decrease in operating expenses. One of the accounts we cut some money from was $39,000 was out of the air pack repair account. We can do that because through the FG grant we had all new air packs in the fire department, all new air cylinders, and so that's reduced that account so we don't have to provide the same support. We've done some inventory control and we've reduced some of the costs in the medical supplies account. That's helped us to reduce that account by $44,000. We have a support division that we initiated when we closed fire station number 4, which helped us in the area of cutting down on some repairs. So we reduced the vehicle repair account down $56,000, and we reduced the education and recreation account down by $59,000. The rest of the money, the $62,000 that you see there, came from various accounts, about 15 different accounts that we cut from various supplies, maintenance, and support services accounts. The next slide represents a decision package that we asked for of the city manager of $200,000 in overtime and $51,000 in benefits, so that we could that we're going to try to come in on that using a tiered program, which I'll talk about in just a minute, and a reclassification of an executive assistant to an office administrator. The next slide represents decision packages that were disapproved by the city manager. One was the fire engine for $900,000, an IT position, some switching of software to help our efficiencies in software, so we're still working on that. We may be able to still do that in this current budget, in the next budget year, through maybe some savings in some other areas. Also the P25 compliance, which is the radios, as far as interoperability and radios. We have till 2021, so we're okay on that, and I think we're probably making good headway on that already, because we bought $171,000 in radios this current budget year. So I think we're getting close to that anyway. And then emergency automatic defibrillator program, and then we want to be able to do the ISO study, and of course the emergency services master plan. These will be how will we manage this. We're going to control the overtime through a tiered program that reduces personnel on some units in the department, and we have evaluated the line items already for maximum efficiencies, and we're already changing some policies in order to streamline responses to save fuel and wear and tear on units. And the tiered program that you see before you is the plan that we've had in place since the day after Station 9 opened. And to put it in perspective, one firefighter for a 24-hour shift represents $1,034 in overtime. This has the possibility of saving up to $4,100 a day. And last count, which was this morning when I asked them to tally this for me, we had saved $219,655 as of this morning from March 9th to yesterday morning. So that's how we hope to do the same thing next year with regard to the overtime accounts. City manager comments or questions?
Mr. Okray.
Hey, Chief, been hearing this tier overtime reduction tier system. Here it is very controversial. What's so controversial about saving money?
We understand that we have a budget challenge, and so our job My job as a department head is to come in within that budget alignment that I'm required to. As far as the controversy goes, there's a belief that we've cut services. We have reduced one person on each of these units, which still makes these units functional, and they still can do the job that they need to do by implementing this tiered program.
And you talk about the cut, it had to do with the Rescue 22? Was it
Rescue 2?
Rescue 22,
Mhm.
but don't we, in there dual qualifications with our firemen?
Yes, a lot of our firemen throughout the department can do many different tasks. So we can run a fire engine to meet those people on scene if we need more personnel to accomplish those tasks. So basically, looking at this, we're taking one person, starting at Tier 1 through Tier 4, we take one each sequentially off of those units to make sure that, that we save as much overtime as we can. And we still have specifically chosen this tiered policy actually sequentially. So we're going to do, the first one is Ladder 6, which has the least impact on the department. The next one, of course, is Rescue 2, which has the next least impact on the department. So we specifically chose it this way, and the battalion chiefs that manage this each morning specifically do this in this sequence to have the most minimal effect on response in the department.
And that's the key, minimal effect, so it ain't no
Right.
controversy, right?
I don't believe it's controversial. I think it's necessary, and I believe it's fiscally responsible considering the circumstances that we all find ourselves in with regard to our overall budget.
Thank you.
Mr. Herrera, I saw your hand go up next after Mr. O'Cray.
I just want to ask, all this change in the Clean Fire Department, is that going to affect our ISO?
Our ISO is, well, with regard to the new grading schedule, I'm not sure. When we do a new ISO study, then we'll know what the new consultant says with regard to the new grading schedule, and they will spell out a plan for us to make sure that we're still in alignment with the ISO goal that we have. A lot of our ISO is accomplished through automatic aid policies. So we have automatic aid with Fort Hood, Harker Heights, Southwest Bell, and those automatic aid policies have a big impact on maintaining this ISO 1 that we currently have in the city.
Do we
of
still
Clinton.
got the ISO one?
We are, yes.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Mrs. King.
Chief, I would just like to thank you and your staff for all the hard work and what the services you provide for our community. Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr.
My staff
Kilpatrick.
my staff does a good job, so thank you, and I'll make sure they know that.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Hey, Chief. I'm looking at operational fees on revenue. Are we, is it even possible, where there's other taxable entities or for-profit businesses which are required because of capacity or because of state or federal laws that are required annual or repetitive fire inspections for certifications for their operations? Are we charging them for those? Or are we doing those as a complimentary service because they're within our city? And the reason why I ask that is because I look over there and I see 40% of every, 45% of every dollar goes to KISD. We get 30. And then we have other educational, and then we have theaters that are required and restaurants.
So the fire, if I'm understanding your question, you're asking maybe a question like, for example, when they go out and do fire extinguisher inspections and things like that? Is that?
Well, it's seeing they're up to the code in their facilities. Do they have not only that, but a number of fire suppressive units within there? Is there annual requirements for any of these buildings to maintain the certifications?
Yeah, they do, but they do it through private enterprise. So what happens is they'll call a fire sales and service company. The fire sales and service company will come out. As a public entity, I'm not sure about the competition clauses or the legalities involved, so that might be more of a legal question with regard to whether we could be involved in providing those fees for service. We do charge fees for service with regard to daycare inspections and some other things like that in the fire marshal's office. C of O's, when we open new businesses, we charge for those. The tests that we do when we come in and we test gas lines, we charge for those when they're opening a building. We have an hourly rate that we charge and an inspection fee. So we are collecting some fees in some areas.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Mr. Harris.
Yes, I was going to ask, when you were talking about the SAFER grants, you said they were like, 'cause it says here they're 75% complete, so they're almost phasing out then, are we already making plans to apply again, or is there like a certain amount of time you have to wait before you can apply for another one?
As soon as the application period opens, then we can apply for a new grant.
Okay.
I don't remember the specific date that the application period opens. It stays open for about 6 weeks. We actually had a discussion about it earlier this afternoon in the office. Not just the SAFER grant, but also the AFG grant as well.
Okay.
Of course, it will require approval from the council to, if we do apply for it,
Right,
to
right.
support us with whatever the matching funding is.
Okay, all right, thank you, sir.
All right, Mr. Johnson.
I have a question about the CERT team. What's
About
your
what? I'm
plan?
sorry.
What's your plan for the CERT team? I spoke to that
The
group
CERT
of
team?
volunteers probably about 6 months ago, and they seem willing to serve. What's your plan for them?
Well, the plan specifically outlined would be probably more of the emergency management coordinators that could answer that question for you, but I can get some specific information for you to make sure that I don't give you any bad information on what the CERT team actually is doing, capable of doing, and what their training is.
That'll work. Thank you.
And that's probably a good question right there. Who's the emergency manager?
Mi Vong is the emergency management coordinator.
Bong?
I was just curious. Just curious.
No problem.
Mrs. Fleming?
I have one question that may, I don't, you can back me up if it's not on the agenda. That fire, truck that we lost within that fire at Mickey's, did we ever get that all cleared up?
With regard to being paid the insurance,
Back
yes.
and everything?
Yes, and that money actually came back to the city. It was also utilized to balance this year's budget.
I think that's the one it shows it as revenue there, right? Is that what the one is that why that shows as revenue? Replace,
This page,
yeah, right there. Is that what that is, the insurance payment?
oh, that's the cost of a new, yeah, that's the cost of a new truck.
So it came back in and?
So, 754,000, if I'm reading this correctly and remember right, I think it might have been 760, but 754 came back to the city, and it was utilized to balance the general fund budget this year.
But that was the insurance payment right there, or?
I believe that's correct.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying, yeah.
Thank you.
Yes.
Go ahead. Mrs. King?
They say we don't You know,
I didn't say that.
I said it, darling.
I can tell the difference.
So the fire truck was in your budget. You lost the fire truck. The insurance money go back to the general funds. Why is that? I'm sorry, I got to
That's okay.
address
No,
the
it's no
city
problem.
manager. Why is that, sir?
I can only speculate a little bit since I wasn't here when that decision was made. I think a year ago, the city council was struggling to figure out how to balance the budget, and there was a lot of stress around that decision. The city, the council, the staff were looking for every dollar they could find to close the gap and balance it. And I think that was, that insurance reimbursement was part of the money that was used to balance the budget. Now, if you want to take it a step further and ask me if I think it's a really good idea that happened, I would hope that if it happened again today that we wouldn't do it that way. But I wasn't here a year ago when all of that financial stress was going on, and I know it was very difficult. And the city felt like they needed the money for operations rather than to replace the truck.
Okay. Thank you for that. And I'm really not questioning the reason they did it. I just thought it was a practice. Like my car, the insurance money come back to me. I didn't know it was because of the budget.
Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
I'm fine with that.
Typically, insurance money coming in to replace major pieces of equipment would replace the major piece of
Okay.
equipment. Last year was an unusual
Okay.
circumstance.
All right. But I want to make it clear, I was not saying anything bad about the
That's
decision.
no problem. To ease your
Okay.
mind, though, we do have a fire engine operating there. It is an older fire engine, but it has the same capabilities. So our services are not infringed in any way with regard to being able to provide the service. Now, later on down the road, can we use some new fire engines? Yes, absolutely. But right now, we haven't compromised service, and people are getting the same service that they had prior to the fire engine that burned out.
And before I get to that, I think that's the key right there is just compromising service, because we got to look at, it's an older engine, and what we did is we just bought time, because I think eventually we are going to have to replace it.
Right.
So, Mrs. Fleming.
Just want to kind of add to what I was asking about the fire chief. That truck was kind of old, right? Because looking at the amount of money that the insurance paid was only $754,000, and I know they cost way more than that. So is there any comprehensive plan in motion that if this happens again, that we would get paid more than that? Because to me, that's not enough to even only buy ladders on the fire
I
department.
think that might be I'm not sure who would be responsible for that. Our risk services department probably would be taking care of the insurance aspects on all of the equipment in the
Seems
city.
like it's taking care of the whole program, of the whole matter that happens, because, I mean, even in my car, well, not to say that, when you have an accident like that, and looking at that fire truck, we should have got way more money than that.
I don't know the specifics of how TML operates, and I believe that's who is insuring it. I don't know the specifics of what their coverages are, but we got the maximum coverage we could for that lost fire.
Well, and it was a relatively new apparatus, but it had some age on it, and I'm sure, I'm only speculating, but typically they pay a depreciated value for the truck. So I'm guessing that we got a reasonable price in the settlement.
Okay, so hypothetically, if this had been a brand-new fire truck, and then it, bam, got the same
Right,
thing happen,
then we'd have gotten more.
you would have gotten almost the
Yeah.
100% of brand new, right? Okay.
Yes.
Just wanted to know, because I'm looking at all the tax money.
I understand.
Those trucks. Thank
Just
you.
like cars. Mr. Rivera.
Not only they have to depreciate the vehicle, they also have to depreciate equipment that is installed in that vehicle per se. So all that depreciation every year, as soon as that vehicle comes out, you get a depreciation on it, like it or not. The insurance based on depreciation value, and that's it.
Mr. Okry.
No, I was just gonna say, if everybody remember last year, we killed our way of replacing vehicles.
We did.
We killed it.
Yeah,
Yeah, we killed that.
Mhm.
Yeah.
I remember. Fleet replacement. All right, anybody else?
I have another comment.
Mr. City Manager.
Yeah, just kind of a, for what it's worth, comment about the ISO rating. One of the goals the chief has is to evaluate the ISO, and we'll be coming up for another evaluation on that pretty soon. ISO ratings are rated between 1 and 9, 9 being the worst and 1 being the best. The city of Killeen is a 1 ISO, which is the best you can get. There's probably not a half a dozen departments in the entire country that have a 1 rating. I don't know how many, but it's a fairly limited number. Pardon me?
I'm sorry, I apologize. Very small number. Yes,
Very
that's
small
correct.
number. So when you move from 9 to 8, there's an insurance saving for people who buy insurance, homes, businesses. When you go from 8 to 7, you save a little money. That's true up to number 2. If you move from number 2 to number 1, you don't get any savings on your insurance. So whatever happens with the insurance rating, if the community goes from a 1 to a 2, it's going to have virtually no impact on our insurance rates. Now, if it goes from a 1 to a 3 or a 1 to a 4, that will have an impact. And just for what it's worth as you think it through.
And the thing in order to maintain that 1 rating, certain things have to happen within our fire department, personnel and all that. And sometimes you got to look at service, are all of that a requirement, so,
You got to look at the cost benefit of doing it.
yeah. Not that we don't want to, but, all right, one more question for Chief.
Just a comment, we should be proud of firefighters. I personally know firefighters that buy their own equipment for training. The rescue squad, when they go out in the water, those helmets that cost $150 for helmet, they buy their own equipment. So I really appreciate what they do. Just to recognize that that's a sacrifice. With the little pay they get, they also buy sometimes their own equipment.
Yeah. No, well said. I think we're all very proud of our fire department. Thank you. Well, it looks like next is Dr. Shana, making his way up.
council members. Today, I'm going to start with code enforcement first. The mission of the code enforcement division is to strengthen the community by protecting property rights and property values in neighborhoods and commercial districts. The mission elements are to enforce housing, zoning, nuisance codes, and other codes, and also to educate the public about property maintenance. Excuse me, there it is. To educate the public about property maintenance and to keep our community free from public health and safety risks. By the numbers, the number of violation inspections performed last year were 27,000. The number of complaints investigated were 13,750. The number of violations abated by code enforcement was 1,100. And the number of violations abated by violators was 9,500. Number of dangerous buildings abated were 7. It's a good thing we have so many people doing the abatement themselves. Our goal for the next year is to develop education materials for the public because this is so essential in combating violations. Code enforcement constitutes about 1.5% FTEs in the general fund and a little bit over 1% of the enterprise. Code enforcement, as part of the budget, they are less than 1% of the expenses in the general fund and less than 0.5% of the expenses in the enterprise fund. Staffing in this division is currently it's budgeted for 14 and it's proposed for 14. Our revenue budget, we receive money from different fees or charges that we make at times. The estimated actual budget for this year is 144,000, and we're anticipating collecting 189,191 in the next year's budget. And we will receive 438,686 from the general fund. That makes it a total of 627,877, and we receive additional funding for a decision package that was approved for 22,823, and a decision package also that was approved for 149,334, bringing that to a total of $834. In the expense budget, we are anticipating that we will spend $800,034 total. Some of that is from the decision packages that have been granted so far. Explanation of the variance: we have unfunded 3 vacant positions, reduced contract labor used to abate properties, and reduced materials and supplies. The decision package that was approved by the city manager were one for reinstating actually 3 positions that were put on hold last year for a total of $126,511, and funding us $22,823 for abatement, which is absolutely necessary for us to do our job. That brings the total of $149,334 in this decision package. Decision packages that were disapproved, we requested an additional code enforcement officer, and that was not approved. Are there any questions?
Mr. Harris.
This is just for knowledge, I guess. Are there any grants available for your department or anything like that?
Not that we're aware of.
Okay.
Mr. Rivera.
Good afternoon, Dr. Chenard. You got total of 14 employees right now?
Yes, sir.
Out of the 14 employees, are those counting secretary?
Yes, sir.
How many secretaries, sir?
We're budgeting for 3 clerks.
3 clerks, that means you only got 11 left,
There are 2 supervisors.
which don't go to the field.
They do.
They do now go to the
Oh,
field?
yes, they do.
Or before they did into cases.
They have to.
So I'm glad to see them out there. Now, going back to those numbers that you just gave us on cases. Those 27,000 violations that you inspect, number of complaints that we investigated was 13,750. That will leave me with 13,250. What happened to those 3,250?
These are 2 separate things.
Right.
The number of violations inspected is the total. The other is simply the complaints that we received. They're 2 separate things.
Would there be also reputation complaints in that number? People complaining about the same issue? Or they get claim number
It's by case.
by case? So they get case number. No, I always said 2 things about you, code enforcement. Number 1, they're understaffed, always been understaffed as far as I know. And number 2, they receive quite a bit of cases every month as an individual base. There was one time they were receiving about 2,000 per person cases. And I was being concerned about your department.
Thank you for your concern. We're doing very good actually with what we have. We could do a whole lot better if we had more, obviously. But I think we have improved the way we do business, and we're doing more with less.
And I know you're not ready maybe to answer this, but most of those complaints is about grass, if I'm not mistaken.
Yes, sir. Right now is the grass season, and it is mostly about grass.
And who cut the grass that you'll complain if you need to cut grass there? Do you outsource someone or you send someone from the city?
We outsource. We have contractors that do that.
Do you remember how much they charge? Do they charge by space or they charge by cases or what?
Like $50 per residential lot, possibly. But it's not. They don't get paid too much. I think we get a good price.
Okay, thank you, sir. Just want to know.
Mr. Kilpatrick.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I think I know the answer, but I need to have it clarified. On the expense budget, personnel services, from 569,650 to the proposed FY17 budget for 511. Is that for reduced contract labor? Is that amount? Because it seems like we're at a near zero-sum gain when you unfunded 3 positions, then you funded the 3 positions. So salaries can't change.
In this presentation, for the additional funding is shown at where the decision package is shown. Actually, it's an addition of $172,157 to the proposed budget. That would be the total.
Well, that would be an increase of 569 to increase to I'm just wondering, the actual estimated 16-17 budget is looked at 569,650.
Yes.
But the proposed budget is 511,903. Normally for salaries, we had an explanation that said that's because we unfunded a clerk or we unfunded 2 librarian assistants. And that's the reason why the actual there moved the salary for the next year. This is about $58,000 difference in salary. What created that difference?
You need to look at the difference between these 2 numbers. The estimated actual is going to be lower than the budgeted number because I'm assuming there were vacant positions during the year. So in this case, you need to compare the budgeted 17 to the budgeted 18, and that's where the reduction of those 3 positions occurs.
So that comes out to 121, not 172. So that's where I was getting confused, is because the only other, there's 126 is for those 3 reinstatements. Okay. All right.
Is it making sense?
I'll look at my map.
We might need to get our accountant to help us with this one.
I looked at it as budgeted and actual. Is that the difference? Not budgeted and budgeted, it's budgeted and actual. So,
Well, before, and I thought in most of them it was estimated actual to our budget in
Yeah.
18. This would be our adopted budget and then the proposed budget. So it was a different,
yeah.
I believe it was a different formula on this one than it had been in all the others.
So we'll have to get with
But I won't hold it up. We'll
Dr. Shanat. I want to ask you a question, and you got to probably refresh my memory, but the money that we receive from fines and violations, is that part of this budget, or is that kept separate under
That's part of the revenue.
revenue?
Yes, sir.
So that's part of the revenue that you see here, the violations and fines and all that?
We charge administrative fees, et cetera, and we're anticipating to collect 189,000 next year.
Mr. Johnson,
Was looking on page 399 about your numbers. What's the status of the complaint of the 10th Street Mobile Home Park, and why do we continue to allow them to put up a 10-foot fence to hide that stuff that needs to be torn down behind there?
All I can tell you is we're working with them on reducing the number of dilapidated structures, and the fence is simply, as I understand it, to make it more presentable.
So, what's your progress for this year? How many mobile homes have you moved?
I don't have the number with me. I'll be happy to give you all the numbers tomorrow.
I would appreciate that. It's the same year after year. I've been a resident of Killeen for 5 years, and all I see is a big old fence. That is an eyesore. It seems like we have some type of internal city policy instead of making these property owners bring up properties up to code, that we just let them put up a fence to hide it. That is trash behind there, leading into our downtown. It needs to be torn down.
10th Street.
have they, have they violated code? Because I know that what we were open at, because they've grandfathered in, right?
They're grandfathered in, and we're working to improve the site. We have made some strides, and the city regulations allow, the city regulations allowed for them to construct that fence, so we could not say, no, you don't have that fence.
Yeah.
So we're making progress. It has been slow in previous months, years even. But this year, there's a big difference. I'll report to the council on this issue.
Is there any way, could you email before and after pictures of the progress for this year? That would be much appreciated.
We can do that.
Thank you, sir.
All right. All right, well, I think you can continue on.
All right. Okay. The next one is the Planning and Development Services divisions. The mission of the Planning and Development Services Department is to conduct short and long-range planning, to administer the building and development codes, and to facilitate orderly development of the city. Mission elements are to conduct long-term comprehensive planning, conduct current planning, conduct plan review, permitting, and construction inspections, and to provide support to boards, commissions, and technical committees. By the numbers, number of plats processed were 44, number of zoning cases processed were 29, and the number of permits issued by the Building Inspections Division was 9,100. The number of inspections performed was 26,000. Our goals for next year are to update the comprehensive plan, to update development regulations, develop annexation plan, and update building codes. Planning and Development Department fits in the enterprise as this. We constitute 2.4% of FTEs in the general fund and 1.72 of the FTEs in the entire enterprise. We also constitute 1.96% of the expenses in the general fund and 0.89% of the enterprise fund. Expenses in the enterprise funds. Staffing, this year we had budgeted 20, next year we are proposing 22. Revenue budget, we do collect fees. We anticipate to receive about $1.25 million in fees next year. And we will receive about $244,740 from the general fund. It brings us to a total of $1,495,883. And we are being granted a decision package of $112,853, which brings the total to $1,608,736. Explanation of revenue variance, increase in revenues due to adding one planner position and refunding a vacant secretarial position. Our expense budget is, we're proposing a total of like $1,495,883 with the addition of the $112,853, a total of $1,608,700. Explanation of expense variance, inflationary increases, benefits, etc. Decision packages approved by the city manager. We proposed option number 1, which is to do the comprehensive plan in-house. And I requested an additional planner, professional that does this kind of work, and refund secretarial position that was left vacant last year. That is the total $112,853.
So,
Mrs. King?
you hiring personnel or one? Okay. Thank you.
Another decision packages that was presented and disapproved, was disapproved. It was for doing the comprehensive plan by utilizing a consultant would cost $300,000. That was disapproved. That concludes my presentation. Are there any questions?
Mr. Kilpatrick?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. On the increase in revenues is due to adding one planner position. How does a planner generate revenue?
It doesn't generate revenue, but we are being funded by the general fund. So we, the department, are getting money from the general fund. So we're calling it revenue to the department. It's not revenue to the city. It's revenue to the department.
Okay.
It's more general fund contribution.
More general fund contribution. I understand that one now. And then on page 421, explanation of expense variance, inflationary increases. We've gone through this entire book except for the police, and that's the first time we saw any justification for increase in expenses for inflationary. So was that inflation, is it across the board? How much is that rate? Is that 2% across the board? Is it 1.4?
I think there was a 2% adjustment on materials and supplies.
And that's across the board?
It's across the
on
board.
all departments?
And it hasn't been mentioned generally because we've seen reductions in those departments. So there was probably not a need to talk about an inflationary increase, even though the money that was left in there has been inflated by 2%.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Mr. Harris.
When it comes to, since we'll have two planners now, when you said about the comprehensive plan, and let's see, 'cause I see the cost would have been $300,000, but with an extra city planner, and I'll always ask this question though, basically, what is the probability of us being able to do that ourselves, in-house? Even as we have a.
Without additional staff, it could take 2-3 years.
Okay.
Was that your question?
Yes, yeah, that was it, yeah. How long would, if it could take us that long, because.
We can. We have started already, but it could take a whole lot longer because I only have one senior planner now,
Mm-hmm.
and the city planner. I have 2 planners only. And they're not available full-time to work on the comprehensive plan. They squeeze it in when they can. So our progress would be very slow. I did one once, long time ago, it took me 3 years, with very small in-house staff.
Can I just tap onto that? Because I kind of understood that's what you were doing. You were doing it in-house, isn't that? You're going to hire, so that's how I understood it.
Yeah, that's what I was saying as far as, like I said, the probability of us doing it, I guess, even so in a timely manner, but you said you had done yours, when you had done yours before, you had done it in 3 years. And so you've still been you've been working on it already, though, like you said. So I guess you said the estimate is about another year or something like that before you think, or another 2 before you think it'll be done if we.
My plan was if we had the staff on hand already,
Mm-hmm.
we would do an expedited.
Right.
schedule of 8 months. That's pushing it.
Yeah.
The consultant that we hired the last time, and he only did a portion of what we're trying to do now, took him a year and a half.
Okay, because I say, the reason I'm really concerned about that, like I said, it's just the budget, but, because we did it back in 2012, 2007, yeah. And it's, yeah, so, like I said, I was just trying to figure out the way to just,
2010, excuse me.
yeah, just trying to minimize that cost, though, but, yeah, but, okay. But, yeah, just go ahead, keep doing what you're doing, keep working on it, and we'll get to it. Yeah, because we need it.
All right, Mrs. Fleming.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I might have missed something because I was running through some papers over here. Dr. Chanel, how you doing? Thank you, sir, and thank you for everything you've done. And I think I got a little confused on this one planner position and the vacant secretarial. Did I understand you to say that you're hiring in-house, or you're going outside to do this?
Wherever we can find the qualified person, in-house or out, we will look.
Have you already started looking?
Because it's
You
not
haven't?
been approved yet.
Okay, so I'm quite sure you're not going to wait till Mr. Olson approves it. I'm quite sure, as smart as you are, you've been kind of having your eye out there looking for the best person, right?
We're looking, but limited because we can't really do an official search.
Okay. So you're going to do search. If someone's within house, you will hire them within house first.
This is a personnel issue that falls under the city manager. The city manager is responsible for personnel.
Well, we'll just take the point of order, just reframe it, just,
Okay, may I reframe that, sir? I'm just wanting to know because I get calls every day about jobs. And, can I get a job, blah, 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 and I tell them to go online. So if this is online, sir, I
I
would
don't
like
think
to
he's
know.
gotten to that step, and
Okay.
I think
I just wanna
Council
rephrase that.
Oakley means that we're not talking about that, we're just kind of stick to the
Well,
budget
I mean,
there.
it's right here, and you can't say it's not on the agenda.
Yeah,
You see one planner position, So if I'm not allowed to talk about this, and it shouldn't be on paper.
Well,
And I
once
can't
we,
see why it's point of
once
order.
we get it approved, then we can bring it back.
Okay, may I bring this back, sir? Will you have an answer for me?
Ma'am, you can ask me anytime you want.
Okay, well, that's
Or
what
go
I'm
to
asking.
him
I'm trying
directly.
to get an answer now.
No, let's
I
move
got
on.
shot down. And I'm tired of getting shot down. Does not make sense. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you.
Well, it's not been approved, so I still want to know.
All right.
Okay, well, Mr.
Hold on, hold
O'Craig,
on. Hey, Mrs. Fleming.
I
no
am
more.
trying to get an answer, okay? You talk when you want to, so please let me talk when I want to. Point of order.
Point of order. Well taken. Let's get back on here.
If you look at the charter, council has nothing to do with personnel.
We're getting back on track here.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you.
I'm done.
Everybody, get back on track here. Dr. Shana, continue.
You stay in yours.
Mr. Mayor, I think it's
Eh,
enough.
Well, he started
Come
out
on.
trying to talk, sir. Can nobody talk but him?
We are adults here.
Now, I am adult.
We are
and treat
adults
me
here.
like an adult.
Let's,
Come on now,
we
do
are
this
adults
every
here.
week.
You represent the city.
I know, sir, but I want to ask Dr.
We
Chanel
can't
about
tell our
this.
children not to fight when, they see this
I know,
from
but
our
we
council,
need to tell our
so.
children, right, that's sitting in.
All right, set a good example. Mr. Johnson,
It's just a point. We have council members here that are rude to other council members.
yeah,
And I think that's our frustration.
yeah.
And we see it. I'm not done. I have the floor, Mayor. I'm not done.
Hold on.
The point is, Mayor, we have council members that are disrespectful
Well, we got it.
to each other.
Let's continue on, because I thought I put it in. Let's stop. Let's stop. Let's move on. No more. I won't entertain anything more that has to do with this. We're just going to move on back into the budget.
Mr. Mayor, call for a 5-minute recess.
Let Dr. Shana finish, and then we'll recess right after him.
He said it.
I'm finished unless there are additional questions.
Yeah.
I was gonna say move for rest, 5-minute break.
Are you
5-minute
done
break.
completely?
Yes, sir, I'm done.
All right, well, everybody go outside, run around a lap, and if you need to, I'll go with you, and we'll back in here. So it's getting emotional. Hopefully we'll make it till 8:30, so take a break.
He don't treat me like he did.
All right, restart. We're going to get restarted.
I'm tall in my mind. And that's what's important.
So hopefully we're going to call this meeting back to order, and we're going to hopefully get through, we got police and we got animal, shelter, animal. And so I just want to remind council, I know that, we all get emotional and that's it, but always remember this is about the numbers. So there's going to be issues here that you may want to question on certain circumstances and stuff like that, but just remember what we're talking about now is the budget. So if you get out of track, then I'll have to put you back in track. If I don't put you back in track, then somebody remind me to put somebody else in back track. And I'll look at you and you just shake them, right? All right. So Chief Young, welcome. You're up.
Thank
Good
you.
luck.
First of all,
We'll do the hokey pokey.
okay, I'd like to cover animal services first. The mission is to administer animal regulations and promote responsible pet ownership. The mission elements are to administer animal code compliance, pick up stray animals, care for in-custody animals, promote pet adoption, and control stray animal population. By the numbers, last year we wrote 1,600 general citations, answered 7,600 calls for service, wrote spay and neuter citations, picked up over 4,000 stray animals, and the unit managed over 5,000 in-custody animals. Adopted out over 2,300 animals and managed to have a live release rate of 82%. Our goals are to maintain the live release rate at 80% or above, expand our partnerships with local businesses to promote adoptions, increase education of the public and responsible pet ownership, and increase volunteer participation. We're staffed with 16 full-time employees, which represents 1.7% of the staffing in general fund and 1.25% in the enterprise. In terms of budget, it's about 1% of expenses and about 0.5% of total enterprise. In terms of staffing, we're budgeted with 18 full-time employees for 16 to 17, proposing unfunding 2 animal control officers to meet budget cap. In terms of revenue, is from fees and general fund, $953,000, and the proposed for 18 is $839,000. The variance is the reduction in total revenues due to the high rate of free adoption promotion events. We've had numerous of those this year, which have allowed the unit to continue the high live release rate. Also received a grant from Petco to provide vouchers for free spay and neuter services for adoption of pets. Under expenses for 17, adopted was $892,000, an estimated actual is $772 due to the amount of vacancies we had. The proposed budget for 18 is $839,245. The variance will be due to unfunding 2 vacant animal control officer positions and reduction in various operation accounts. For example, overtime, vehicle repair, vet supplies. Decision packages approved were none. Disapproved was requesting back the animal control, one of the animal control positions that we unfunded. I don't think there's any manager comments.
Any questions? All right, moving on.
Okay, the police department. Mission of the police department was to reduce crime, fear of crime, and enhance public safety. Our mission elements involve accomplishing our mission to conduct crime prevention activities, investigate crime, and enforce the law, enforce traffic laws, and respond to calls for service. By the numbers, we had over 149,000 calls for service. Our response time for priority 1 calls was about 8 minutes. Under investigations, our Part 1 crime rate is 3443, and our clearance rate is 18%, and we conducted 461 crime prevention activities. For traffic enforcement, we had 364 DWIs, and we had a very unusual 0 alcohol-related traffic deaths in 2016. Our goals for next year are to reduce crime through increased staffing and patrol by assigning resources from Special Investigations Division, reevaluate staffing in the Criminal Investigations Division, also move organized crime under CID, utilize data-driven approaches to crime and traffic safety, also known as DDACS, methodology in patrol, which is a proven method utilizing crime mapping overlaid with crash data to have the biggest impact on crime in certain areas. How we fit in the organization. We make up 38% of the full-time employees in the fund and 20% in the enterprise. In terms of budget, 34% of expenditures in the general fund and 50% in the city. In terms of staffing, budgeted for 368 in fiscal year 16 and 17. However, during this fiscal year, we did unfund 1 sworn and 2 civilian positions. For fiscal year 18, we're looking to unfund 19 police officer positions, 2 police clerks, 1 captain position, and 1 senior secretary position. All these positions are currently vacant and would bring our numbers of full-time employees to 342. The department would be reorganized, which I'll cover later in the briefing. Revenue budget comes primarily from the general fund and some grants, a small amount from operation fees. Fiscal year 17 is estimated at $27,894,000, and the proposed base budget revenue for 18 is $27,925,000. The revenue variance stems from a decrease in fees, such as decline in requests for paper copies of police reports, false alarm fees, secondhand store fees, reduction of the COPS grant, special traffic enforcement grant, crisis assistance program, and other grants as they get older. On the expense side, adopted for 17 was $29,873, and the proposed base budget is for $27,925,000, with the addition of requested decision package, which I'll cover in a moment. On the variances on the expense, we have reduced vacant positions, 1 captain, 19 police officers, 1 senior secretary, 2 police clerks, as well as decreasing some operational expenses such as overtime, ammunition, and minor tools. In terms of decision packages, to meet the allotted budget cap, I reduced the proposed overtime to $800,000. The department has averaged about $1.2 million over the past several years, and based on this history, I'd requested an additional $200,000 plus the associated benefit costs, which would bring the total budget for overtime to $1 million. I also requested about $35,000 to reclassify the 12 communication specialist positions that are having difficulty in recruiting and retaining this position, which is classified at a grade 52. Employees are required to staff the communications office 24/7. I currently have only 5 of those 12 authorized positions filled, and to backfill them with police officers and jailers is, at a much higher rate, is not the way to go. Disapproved, none. In managing the department, the police department will focus on its core mission: reduce crime, fear of crime, and enhance public safety. To do this, I feel we must increase the patrol presence, focus on reducing our reliance on overtime, utilize on-duty personnel for special details, implement DDAX methodology, focus on the crime issues, increase crime prevention efforts, and community policing, and decrease response times to calls. In order to do this, I would need to reorganize the assignments of some of the department's personnel to increase patrol. Although this is a budget briefing and not an operations discussion, I would like to just touch briefly on operations. With the unfunding of 20 persons, it presents a challenge to accommodate our core mission, which is patrol and investigations. We recently added 12 COPS grant positions to CID to assist with the violent crime. We evaluated and reorganized CID, creating and recently expanding a homicide unit. I believe we have a greater impact on crime prevention and in combating the fear of crime by turning now our attention to patrol. There are currently 5 divisions commanded by 5 captains. We have 32 police officer vacancies. 9 of those are COPS grant vacancies. We have 4 officers participating in local task force. I would propose decreasing that to 4 divisions commanded by 4 captains, and funding 19 of the vacant 32 positions, keeping the grant positions, moving most of the personnel occupying the specialized units in CID, which would be burglary and special missions, to the patrol division. This would allow for additional officers on the road where they can have the most impact, responding to calls by service, by increasing numbers of officers in each watch, provide much-needed assistance in uniform officers responding to calls, provide better service to citizens, and allow for on-duty officers to conduct special details in problem areas. SID is the specialized units. The burglary unit detectives are currently working auto theft, runaways, and burglaries. The special missions unit is the tactical unit that assists with high-risk events. CID would have to absorb the burglary and auto theft and runaway missions while these officers move to patrol. This would require the reanalysis and possible reorganization of CID with this additional mission. The organized crime unit would stay intact and come under CID chain of command. The patrol division would have to absorb the special mission activities, special mission unit. We currently deploy officers by beat area assignment. With this proposal, patrol would have more staffing to implement the DDAX program based on crime and crash hotspots. Now, there are pros and cons to this reorganization. The pros are we were able to meet budget cap. We're able to downsize the organization and still have an impact on crime. Patrol gets the help it has been needing by the increase in staffing. We can reduce the number of reports taken per officer, which can decrease the need for overtime for report writing. We can reduce the number of calls per officer, decreasing the amount of stress. With more officers on the road, the response times to calls can decrease. Officers will have more time for proactive patrol activities. Officers will have more time to conduct community policing activities or special details to address certain crime problems. And although it's difficult to measure, more officers and faster response time will most likely have an impact on crime in terms of prevention. The cons are CID will have to review its mission and staffing to take additional investigations without additional personnel. This will have a slowing impact on investigative mission in general. The second is the morale of the seasoned detectives will be lowered by having to go back to patrol duties and shift work.
Mr. Rivera.
Chief, I want to take this time to thank you for sitting down with me last Monday for 1 hour and give me some explanation about the CID and SID, how they're going to be working. Also, the explanation you gave me pertaining to the civilian personnel and the cut of personnel, including the captain, and the reason that I gave you about the captain, why I didn't want to see it cut, but you just, and I know why you did it. And the salary, we spoke about the morale of your police force. That I'm always concerned. And the difference on the budget that I see in the state level, that we might be short about $31 million for capital, for, as a whole in the budget. And also as well that we went through and we spoke about the impact that CID is going to have and the operation of CID, which I'm very, very concerned about the CID, because that's what the heart of the investigation is. And leaving that investigation to go hit the street on a patrol, you're right, might create a little bit of problem on the way. So, and the manpower that you have and you're trying to create. All the explanation you gave me and all the questions that I had, I thank you for it. If not, I would have about 30 or 40 questions for you today. So I just want to thank you for all that time that, and what you're doing, but I'm still concerned about the CID. I'm concerned about the operation, them leaving their job, going to the field. I'm concerned about the SID. But all those things, I'm very sure you will work out with the new chief. Thank you, Chief.
Yes, sir.
Mrs. King.
Thank you, Mayor. Mr. City Manager, I have a question.
Yes, ma'am.
I remember us talking about the jail, that you made a recommendation that you want to keep it open. I didn't see any mention. Is that a part of the 17-18 budget? And also about, I think it was short 12 police officers, or was it 19? Yeah,
That we're getting rid of?
yeah, 19. Is it
19.
Okay.
And then one captain, so a total of 20 commissioned.
So that's a concern. Could you talk on that as far as the budget?
The budget includes staffing and budget to, for all of the jail staff. So it's not called out because it's part of the standard budget for the.
Oh, I'm sorry. I was talking about the equipment. You said you wanted back operation like a command station. Was that included in the budget?
Are you talking about the Emergency Operations Center? That's in the fire department budget,
Okay, okay.
so that is covered. What was the other part of your question?
It was the jailers, that was one, and the 19 officers.
There is a reduction of 20 uniformed officers out of the, 30, how many vacancies do you have?
32.
32. So there are currently 32 vacant positions. This unfunds 20 of those. They've actually been vacant for quite a long time. So obviously, the more the better, but that's true of every department. Every department that's cut back, if we had more people, it would actually be better for everybody. So, yes, we're cutting 20 vacant positions out of the department, but it's my hope and my intention to fill the 12 vacancies that we currently don't have on the street. So, at the end of the day, by the end of the year, I would expect with the reorganization and the hiring of vacant positions that our police department is going to be stronger in a year than it is today.
That was it. Thank
All right.
you, sir. And thank you, Chief, for all you do, and your staff.
Mr. Johnson.
I have just a quick question. I was looking on page 194. Is the PAO still doing record manager duties, or did that get split? I was just curious.
Is who?
The new PAO is, I think it's.
Are they doing records management duties? No, we've actually hired a new records manager. They did do some training. I don't know if she's still training, but she's
Okay.
gone up there and made sure that she's well-versed in what she needs to do.
Okay.
We did fill that position.
Okay, that's awesome. Thank you.
All right. Anybody else? All right. Thank you, Chief. Was that it?
No.
Oh,
Mr. Mayor, that finishes the general fund,
Oh.
and now we'd like to move to the water and sewer fund, followed by the solid waste fund.
all right.
It's actually kind of a miracle. We're making good progress so
That's
far.
it. Huh? I think we'll get by 8:30.
Water and sewage, he said.
With your permission, I'll start with the fund summary for the water and sewer department.
You're good to go.
Water and Sewer Fund. We start by looking at the mission of the fund. It's all right, I don't use it anyway. The mission here is to provide water and sewer services, meaning water supply, water distribution, water treatment, wastewater collection, wastewater treatment, and disposal. So it's a comprehensive water fund that provides everything we need. One of the distinguishing parts of the mission here is that unlike the general fund, which is primarily supported by taxes, this fund is primarily supported by user fees. And that's an important aspect of the enterprise fund to understand. Let's go to the next page. The water and sewer fund makes up 23% of the entire city operation. Let's go to the next page. These three graphs, donut graphs, give an indication, kind of a big picture of the fund. The outside ring shows the revenue sources that are coming in proportion to how much is being received from each one of those areas. And the inner circle, the donut hole, shows how the money is being used, in what proportions. And we'll cover that in a little bit more detail as we get into it. Let's go to the next page. This is a kind of a table of the revenues coming into the water and sewer fund. Down the left-hand column are the various revenue sources that support the water and sewer fund. You see the actual from fiscal 16, the budget for 17, the estimated actual for 17, and then the proposed budget for 18. And you can see that proposed revenue side looks like about $40.9 million in the water and sewer fund. Let's go to the next page. There will be no proposed change in rates. And the next page actually shows what the water rates are in their various categories. And the page following that shows what the wastewater rates are. Let's go to the next page. When we look at the expense by category, meaning contracts, debt service, personal services, materials and supplies, indirect costs, franchise fees, and fleet costs and capital outlay, each one of these pie graphs show you how much of the money is being spent in those different areas. The graph on the left shows what it was 10 years ago. The graph in the center shows what it was last year. And the graph on the right shows what the fiscal 18 budget is proposed to be. Let's go to the next page. This is more detail of the expenditures in the fund. Down the left-hand side, you see the various cost centers inside of the fund. And again, the table works out the same way. And the bottom line of the proposed fiscal 18 budget is $40.9 million, which balances with the estimated revenues. Let's go to the next page. We are always concerned about our retained earnings, our fund balance, our working capital. Those are all synonyms for how much money we're retaining in the fund. And you see that we start with $12 million. We have $40 million of income and $40 million of expense with no net change, and we end with 38% in that fund. Now that's above the target of 25, so again, we're proposing that a capital projects fund be established, and we establish appropriate policies to transfer the amounts of in excess of 25 into the capital budget to be used for important, specific water and sewer projects. Let's go to the next page. This is a summary of the staffing in the water and sewer fund. You can see in fiscal 16, we had about 149 employees. In 17, we budgeted about 124. And in 18, we're proposing that be reduced to 120 approximately. Let's go to the next. This is a staffing by department inside of the Water and Sewer Fund. Some of those staff are proposed to be moved to an internal service fund in the information technology area. Let's go to the next page. So this is the summary of the net changes. We're proposing to reduce about a quarter of a full-time equivalent, and that position is currently vacant. Let's go to the next page. This is our long-term projection for the Water and Sewer Fund. Unlike the general fund, you can see that the green line is just about on top of the blue line, and that tells us that the fund is sustainable as it moves into the future. With that summary, what we'd like to do now is go through the departments in the Water and Sewer Fund, and I think we're going to start with
Mr. Johnson.
collections.
I was looking on page 217, and it has non-operating expenses, and it has KEDC.
Yes, the city has the tradition or pattern of making a contribution to the Killeen Economic Development Corporation and to the Chamber of Commerce. And I can't remember the exact numbers at this point, but half of that contribution is paid for from the general fund, and half of it is paid for from the Water and Sewer Fund.
Is that good practice?
That's kind of a hard question for me to answer. It's not a horrible practice. Is it ideal? You know, I think part of that comes down to the philosophy, and I think the reason it's being done that way is that the utilities support economic development, and I do think that an argument, a justification can legitimately be made that the Water and Sewer Fund should support economic development because utilities are a really big part of economic development. So I don't find it offensive, but I don't know how that compares in terms of best practice. So I wish I could be more specific. There's a question mark there that comes down to a policy decision, and like I said, I don't find it totally offensive. I'm not sure it's the best thing either.
That's a good question, because I think that doesn't the revenue that we generate from ADC come from like the 2%? There's a 2% in the sales tax that we get that's used for economic development. And that revenue, where does that go? Does that go into our general funds, or does that go into a different department?
I believe it is a general fund, but I'm trying to remember about the 2% for economic development. I'm not familiar with that. Right. That sounded different to me.
Yeah, well, then I'm just confused, because I know that when they speak and then there's a 2% something that comes out.
The way that we used to calculate how much money was 2% of the
Maybe that's what it is, but there's somewhere, I thought it was 2%, because I know that it was, from what I would understood, it was like 8.25% sales tax, and 2% of that is supposed to be for economic development, so.
Whatever that formula used to be, it pretty much went out the window last year.
Yeah.
And so I'm not sure that there is a working formula at this point in time.
All right, anybody else? All right,
Okay, so who's up with utility collections?
Mr. Locke.
Thank you again, Mayor and Council. The mission of utility collections is to accurately bill and collect on a timely basis for all city utility services. There are three mission elements: read meters, bill for service, and collect accounts. Looking at some of the numbers associated with those elements, last year there were 50,300 active water accounts and 51,700 meters read monthly by our meter readers. There were a total, again, of 50,300 water accounts, and this just breaks it down by the number of FTEs that the water department has. So it shows that our utility collections department services 1,300 customers per FTE. Our collection rate is we collect on active accounts 98% of the time, and so our delinquency rate is 2%. Our goals in utility collections for 17-18 is to implement an outbound and interactive voice response system on delinquent accounts. We think this will help collect on accounts in a more timely manner, and to improve online services offered to customers. Utility collections makes up 33% of the FTEs in the water sewer fund, and a little over 3% of the FTEs enterprise-wide. On the budget side, utility collections is a little over 6% in the water and sewer fund, and 1.4% enterprise-wide. The FTEs proposed are holding steady at 39.5. The actual water and sewer fees collected are not attributed to utility collections. So all of utility collections budget comes from the water and sewer fund. The total proposed budget is $2.4 million. There was an approved decision package of $27,000, so the overall total will be $2.5 million.
Mr. Mayor?
Mr. Rivera.
Wait, I'm gonna wait. It's about that slide. Okay, I'm ahead. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
On the expense side, the proposed budget for 18 has $1.4 million for personnel and a little over $1 million in materials and supplies. There's two components of that $1 million that make up the bulk of it. The postage and supplies related to sending out the utility bills is $375,000, and the merchant fees that we pay when customers use credit cards is close to $500,000. Again, the total budget is $2.5 million, including the $27,000 decision package.
Mr. Mayor, now I got a question.
Mr. Rivera.
Let me go back real quick here. You have, in the slide before, and stay on that one that you're at, you had 27,460 as additional, oh, you don't have any additional revenue. Additional package from water and sewer. What the division package that you're talking about? Can you explain that to me?
Yeah, it was a utility cashier position.
That's what it is?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Simple that way for me. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
And on the expense variance, that shows where the unfunded utility cashier position was added. And there was a reduction in the collection expense, and that's when we switched the collection providers recently.
Got it.
We just touched on the decision packages approved by the city manager. The utility collections position, and there were no decision packages disapproved.
You're done? Oh, wow. I'm sorry. Questions? Wow. Good job. Mr. Olson, you got to beat that.
We'll give it a whirl. Next piece we're going to go through here is the Water and Sewer Division within Public Works. Mission for our Water and Sewer Division is to deliver a safe and reliable source of drinking supply to our customers, and we efficiently collect and dispose of the wastewater generated thereafter. We have three primary mission elements. Each one has a sub-mission element under that. The first piece here is water distribution. This is the group that maintains water mains, water service lines. They install any new taps or service meters as necessary. They seek to reduce our water loss and maintain any appurtenances or fire hydrants. This last piece here, flushing fire hydrants and dead-end water mains, that is a TCEQ mandated requirement that keeps our drinking water fresh and of a good quality. The second piece we have here is the sewer collection division. Inside of sewer collection, they monitor, report, and prevent any sanitary sewer overflows. That's a key aspect of this division. Anytime there is a sanitary sewer overflow, that's obviously a negative aspect, and we try to keep those to a minimum. Along with that, they're going to service and maintain any manholes or sewer mains that we have in the city. And they also do line locates for both the water and sewer division when we have new development that comes in, and the call before you dig aspect. These guys go out and they locate our lines so that they don't get hit inadvertently during construction. The final piece here is the overarching umbrella that manages our water and sewer division. We call it water and sewer administration. This piece of it, they manage the personnel and the contracts. That includes our contracts with Bell County WCID #1 for water rights and wastewater disposal. They are the customer service arm of the Water and Sewer Division, and they seek to prevent any accidents within the division, collect necessary samples as required. One of the key things we'll touch on here, this is the group that you hear BPAT FOG, that's our backflow prevention, and then fats, oils, and grease program. This is a program that we have put into place to try to keep our wastewater rates lower. The more fats, oils, and greases that go into our sewer system, the higher our rate goes because it takes more money to treat that type of a wastewater concentration. The final piece here is that this group is responsible for managing and maintaining the water and sewer master plan along with any long-range water or wastewater planning initiatives. When you look at the numbers, I won't go down and read through all these numbers for you, but we'll touch on a few of them here. We have approximately 651 miles of water lines that are contained within this city. And then on the converse side of that, 571 miles of sewer main that are contained within this city. One thing I'd like to touch on there, this year we've flushed approximately, by the end of the year, we will have flushed approximately 1.5 million linear feet of sewer main. That's about 50% of our overall sewer system has been flushed and cleaned to make sure that those pipes are working efficiently. The last piece here, we've collected over 22,000 water samples, 325 sewer samples, and the piece here with the BPAT FOG, they have performed 5,000 inspections on various structures across town. Looking at our goals for FY18, we plan to try to reduce our total water loss by 2% at a minimum. We're going to complete our water line rehab phase 2 project. Flow test approximately 50% of the fire hydrants within our system over the course of the next year. Continue to flush any fire hydrants and dead-end mains per TCEQ regulations. We've established a goal to complete any new service taps and water meter sets within 3 weeks of application. and to replace approximately 20% of the meters that have registered over 1 million gallons across the city. That's a key component right there, because if you look across our city, we have over 21,000 meters that have seen more than 1 million gallons of water pass through them. A meter is a mechanical part, and anytime that mechanical part sees water pass through, there are gears that turn, there are parts that work within it. Compare this to your mileage on your car, and when you get to that 1 million gallon mark, that's like seeing a car that's hit 200,000 miles. It's starting to wear out at that point. You have some life left in it, but you're not getting the efficiency, so that's a key aspect there. In sewer collections, we look to maintain our SSOs below 4 per 100 miles of sewer main. That's a line that's set by the state as a goal to achieve for sewer operating systems. We plan to evaluate 25% and clean approximately 15% of our sewer mains, complete sewer line rehab phase 3, and also complete our STEP phase 10. That's the septic tank elimination program that started some years back. Within water and sewer administration, we have some upgrades to our electronic controls that we're working with IT now, and some security measures that we're implementing. We'd like to complete that this year. There is a completion of the FOG program. That's our fats, oils, and greases I mentioned earlier. We would like to complete the final phase of that this year by implementing a grit trap ordinance. That's one more preventative measure to help reduce the concentration of wastewater that we send downstream. And we want to look for no time loss on accidents, no violations from TCEQ. And another big one here is to complete this electrical consumption analysis at our pump stations. You'll see as we move forward, there's a good bit of money spent every year on electricity for pump stations and lift stations, and we feel like if we can reduce the electricity consumption, we'll be doing a great deal there. Looking at the water and sewer division from the funds perspective, we are 55%, give or take, of the fund FTEs, and approximately 5.15% of the FTEs within the city as a whole. Moving to expenses, we've got 46.31% of the overall expenses in the water and sewer fund, and 12.19% of the expenses within the city as an enterprise. Staffing was bumped up in FY 16-17. We added 4 operator positions to help keep up with the workload. We're proposing to keep that steady in FY 18. When you look at revenues, this is operational fees, includes all of the fees that we collect for both water, sewer, and other fees for development as well. We're projecting $40,336,026. Miscellaneous, that's going to be some of your tap fees, some of your new meter set fees, those type of things fall into that miscellaneous category. The total allocated budget for the water and sewer division is $21.9 million. The revenue increases that are projected are due to an increase in usage and the number of customers. And looking at this, we've gone up just a hair under 10% in the total number of customers over the last year, and keep that in mind. We'll touch on that again here shortly. When you look to expenses, again, I'm not going to read these to you line by line, but our total expense budget is $21.9 million. That lines up with our revenues that we accounted for here. Key thing to look at is we are about a 0.5% increased in overall expenditures in this division. And you'll recall I said just a second ago, we increased our total number of customers by about 10%. So we're doing much more with not an equivalent amount of more money. So many more customers and a small increase in expenditures. One of those expenditure increases was an increase in the cost of water per our WCID contract. We also had some increases, general increases in the cost of materials and supplies. Those are the pipes, fittings, those types of things that are necessary to do business. And we had a decrease this year in our capital outlay budget. There were no decision packages that were approved by the city manager. We did submit a few, and a couple that I'll touch on here Looking at the renovation of the water and sewer building down at the bottom here, that's something that we are accounting for in the long-term capital improvement plan. That is an expense long-term. We would like to put a water quality lab and some additional offices in the other half of our existing building that's just a shell building right now. The next one that I'll touch on is the water meter replacement. You heard me say it earlier. We have 21,000 plus meters that are over that million-gallon mark. That means that every dollar worth of water that we send through that meter, we may be only capturing 90 cents on the other side of that meter. So we're losing water across these meters. And what we had here was an additional request for more than the 20% we're going to replace this year. What we would like to look at, though, are maybe some other options over the course of this next year and as we look at our capital improvement plan.
Mr. Mayor?
Mr. Rivera.
So you said that we're losing water as it is right now in that area. Can you put that into a dollar amount?
It's hard to put it into a straight dollar amount. You saw way back in the slides, right now we have about a 20% water loss across the city.
Right.
Not all of that is meters. Some of it is flushing dead-end mains. Some of it is water line breaks that occur throughout the year. But overall, we have about a 20% water loss. A good portion of that can be attributed to the water meters, but it's difficult to measure without a lot of additional study.
I understand. Thank you.
Mr. Okrie.
You're talking about water meter replacement. What is it? Was this $275,000? What is that for? A study to replace them?
No, that's
Or
the
is this for connection from a water source?
no, that's the meter on any existing house. If it's an older house and it's had a lot of water that's passed through it, it's probably worn out. So there's a small device that's inside your meter box. That's your water meter. Those cost somewhere between $20 and $40 a piece. So as we start to replace those, along with the time and other materials necessary to replace the meters, we're physically going to a house, pulling the old one out, dropping it in, and dropping the new meter in. And what you'll see there is where before the old meter may have been a little worn out, and it's not accounting for every gallon that goes through that water meter. A new meter, new parts, it's going to work better, and it will account for every gallon that goes through it.
Thank you.
All right. Mr. Harris.
I'm sorry, I must have missed that on this part when it says explanation of expense variance. Just wanted to make sure that when you have down here increase in cost of water, what was that again?
That is the base increase. It went from, it's 65 cents per 1,000 gallons this year is what we pay WCID for treated water, and that's up just a hair. It's a few cents from last year.
What was it last year?
62, I believe, is it. I'll have to look that up and confirm to be sure, but I believe it was 62 cents, and it's gone up to 65 cents.
Okay, all right, thank you, sir.
Mr. Kilpatrick.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Hmm.
Recently, we changed our procedure process of how we do our water taps with developments. Refresh my memory, is that going to increase, decrease, or remain status quo of our revenue?
From a revenue perspective, we saw a slight decrease in the revenue there, but the overall operational efficiency increase accounted for that, so they balance one another out, and we keep all of the folks that were doing those water meter or water taps are still on staff, so the personnel and materials and supplies necessary for those folks is still a cost. They're just able to be applied in a more efficient manner in other places.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Okay.
David.
Mrs. Fleming.
David, in the north side, you know, where I live over there, there's a lot of old meters and old pipes and everything over there. Would you have to know, which it's probably a hypothetical question to ask you, have you had many change of meters over in that area?
We have not had a good meter replacement program historically, and that's what we're proposing to start with the FY18 budget.
Oh, great, okay. Okay, that sounds it. So you will be notifying the residents when you maybe start doing that changeover? Because,
I have to check and see exactly what the notification process is. It's a very simple drive out, pull the meter out, put the new meter in
Okay.
process, so their downtime would be very minimal. Our folks in water and sewer would work with them to make sure that it doesn't interfere with.
okay. Because I know there's been a lot of pipes over in that area bursting and people fussing about their meters. And a lot of times, I just got to say truthfully, my bill is the same every month. I don't know whether it's going up or down or what. So evidently, I don't know if the water's going through correctly or what. I'm not complaining, but it's the same, it's the same thing every month. So I'm just wondering. And I wash my car, I water my grass and everything, so I don't know if it's running through correctly or not. Just check it out,
You
okay?
better check that one out.
Thank you.
And
Thank you,
what
David.
What I will say too,
Uh-huh.
to address your concerns about the pipes and whatnot that are older, you saw mention there, we're
Right.
closing out water line rehab phase 2, closing out sewer line rehab phase. Those are North Killeen projects. Those are
Okay.
projects that are addressing our older water and sewer infrastructure. So we are continuing those programs.
Thank you, David. Thank you, Mr.
Thank
Mayor.
you. Remember what I say, stay on budget.
I'm
So,
staying on
Stay on
budget.
budget. Mr. Harris.
I see when I was talking about the increase, I guess I forgot to ask the question, did they say why it was increased?
It's increase in operational costs for them. They review their costs annually, and then those costs are passed on to us as the consumer.
Okay. I'm just thinking about the new plant we gave them, how much money we gave them. We're getting our cost increased.
Finish?
Okay, but- Yeah, I'm done. I'm just talking to
Mrs.
myself
King,
now,
you
I
had
guess.
some? Oh, okay, thank you. All right, move on, Mr. Olson. Oh, you're done. Next. Mr. Olson, thank you, Mr. Olson, and welcome, Mr. Olson.
It gets confusing after a while, doesn't it?
We're going to have to put numbers on you, 1 and 2.
Okay, so we've now covered the general fund and the water and sewer fund, and now we're going to move on to the solid waste fund. I will give you the fund summary, and then we'll get into some departmental details. This fund's mission is to collect, transport, and dispose of solid waste in our community. Again, as an enterprise fund, it is supported from user fees and not from taxes. Let's go to the next page. It represents about 10% of the entire city operation. And these are the donut charts that apply to the solid waste fund. Again, the outside ring represents the money coming in from a couple of different sources, and the inside of the donut hole represent how the money is being used. You've got on the left 10 years ago, in the center last year, and on the right the proposed for fiscal 18. Let's go to the next page. This is a revenue page. Down the left-hand side, you have the revenue categories of monies coming into the fund. You can see that the projected and proposed budget for fiscal 18 is about $18 million. Let's go to the next slide. We are proposing no change in fee with this budget. This is a table of the user fees. Let's go to the next page. These are the categories of expense. You can see that there's a number of them, and the proportions you can compare 10 years ago to last year to the proposed FY18 budget, and you can see how those proportions have changed over time. Let's go to the next one. These are the, this is a table of the cost centers inside of the solid waste budget. The bottom line is 17.4, so it's a little bit less than the projected revenue. I will point out this line right here that says mowing. Mowing is not a typical service of a solid waste fund. It's something that happened in the city, I don't know when, a number of years ago. I don't know exactly why. It appears to me that it probably happened because that was the fund that had money available, to be candid about it. So that is an unusual expense for a solid waste fund. Let's go to the next page.
Question.
Mr. Rivera.
Do you have any plan to move that out of that budget out of that area?
Yes, and yes. Now, obviously, it will be a strain on the general fund, so we have to move slowly because the general fund is weak right now. But even with this budget, we have proposed moving part of those expenses out, and as we have capacity and ability, we will move them out until they're gone out of the solid waste fund.
Thank you, sir. Thank you.
This page tells us what the fund balance of the solid waste fund is, and you can see, for example, in fiscal 18, we are starting with about 5.2 million. We're bringing in 18 million, proposing to spend 17.4 million. So that's a net gain in fund balance of about 600,000, leaving us with just short of 6 million at the end of the year, which represents over 39% of the budget. So again, we have a fund that is exceeding its fund balance target. As part of our plan, we'll create a capital fund, get the council to adopt some appropriate policies with the intent of transferring anything over 25% into the capital fund for the specific purpose of providing capital projects for solid waste purposes. Not for other purposes, only for solid waste purposes. And we'll make sure that the fund is structured in a way that protects that money for that purpose. Okay, let's go to the next page. You can see the history here of the number of employees, the staffing of the solid waste fund. Last year in fiscal 17, there was 107 employees budgeted. Looks like we're going to finish with an actual of about 106, and for fiscal 18, we're proposing 102. A good portion of that, and I'm sure David will cover this in more detail, but that's part of an efficiency effort. It's been, as we have studied the solid waste, 6 months ago, the council gave us the latitude to look at our solid waste fund and see what we could do to become as efficient as we could as we went along, and then we're going to report out to you after the 1st of October on what our findings are. But that reduction is part of the effort to be more efficient in that fund. So I don't want you to think we forgot about your charge to us. We have been working on it and making appropriate changes over the past several months. Let's go to the next page. This is staffing by department inside of the solid waste fund. And you can see that there is a proposed reduction of 4 positions. Let's go to the next page. And this is part of the answer to Mr. Rivera's question. Four of those people who've been providing mowing are being transferred to a different fund, more appropriate for the mowing. Let's go to the next page. Okay, so again, you look at the long-term projection in this fund, and revenues actually consistently exceed the expenditures. So this fund is healthy, and it is projected to be healthy into the future. That concludes the summary of the fund.
That's probably one of our healthiest funds we've seen so far.
Yes.
And what, looking at all the other ones, what is the main contributor? Is it growing along with the city, the revenue? Is that because of the growth? Are we charging more fees or what?
And the fees are appropriately set to recover costs.
To recover costs every year or just?
Yes.
Mr. Okry.
Yes, Mr. Olson, back to this mowing. is that this $782,000 covered as an expenditure? We talked about $2 million in the enterprise, so this is covered in that number. This is not an additional,
No, this is an additional number.
it's not.
It is not in the $2 million.
So we're spending $2.7 million to mow grass.
Yes, sir.
Thank you.
Now, there are, just for understanding, there are two different kinds of grasses that are being mowed. The mowing from the solid waste fund is primarily roadside mowing, so it's the right-of-way next to roads is what's being covered here. The other $2 million is for parks and public properties, which is a different kind of mowing.
Mr. Mayor?
Mr. Rivera.
Sir, I got a question in the same area per se, not to, I want to put more into it, but just for my knowledge also as well. So we got those two. What about co-enforcement mowing, the one that they do in a private area? Do you know how much they spend a year?
I don't know what that number is. Perhaps Dr. Shinaka.
If you don't worry about it, you can send it to me later.
We can get it for you later.
Yeah, get it for me later.
Is that it? Nope.
Mr. Johnson?
On page 63, you have a transfer out, 2.6 million. That 1.5 million for fleet funding, that's included that's all included within the transfer. This line item, that 2.6 million,
Yes.
that includes the 1.5.
Yes, I believe it does.
Okay.
All right. Switch.
All right, this next piece, we're going to talk a little more detailed about the solid waste services. This won't cover the mowing. That's going to come in a later presentation when we talk about items that are funded through multiple funds. As Mr. Olson said, the Solid Waste Division's mission is to collect and dispose of solid waste. It's pretty simple, really. The way we do that, we have 5 different groups that are part of this mission. The first piece here, the residential group, they collect garbage, brush, bulk trash, and waste from residential facilities. They also conduct an annual spring cleanup event. That's where it's a free disposal of bulk trash. And along with, they plan and develop the expansion of the solid waste services enterprise as a whole. Commercial operations, they collect garbage for commercial facilities. One thing to point out here, these folks work 7 days a week, 365 days a year. This is a round-the-clock business, and it never stops. They also provide roll-off services to businesses for construction projects or remodeling, those types of things where they have a large bulk disposal that they know is upcoming. Our recycling center administers programs to increase recycling and reduce litter across the city. We have two locations that collect recyclables, and we conduct at least one household hazardous waste collection event every year. Transfer station is the hub that disposes of any refuse that's collected by any of the aforementioned groups. They also maintain the closed landfills that we have and monitor contracts for disposal with our haul to the Temple landfill. Our accounting division is the customer service group within solid waste, somewhat similar to utility collections for water and sewer. When you look at the numbers, we'll touch on a couple of things here. One, we're currently at 50,328 residential customers. Again, that's up about 10% from this time last year. When you look at commercial collection customers, we have just north of 1,500 commercial customers. We're recycling about 1,100 tons of recyclables per year and collecting about 101,000 tons of garbage per year. This last piece here I find interesting is 118,682 customer service calls in a year. We have 4 folks that answer those calls. You do the math, and that comes down to 57 calls per hour that come in for 4 folks to answer, or each person is answering a call about every 3 to 5 minutes. Some of our goals outside of our standard core mission here, We are going to perform an ongoing route analysis that's going to allow us to alter our collection days and collect garbage in a more efficient manner. We'd like to improve our fleet by replacing 6 of our aging vehicles. And one of the things you've heard the city manager talk about is a focus on risk management. We intend to reduce our preventable accidents by at least 50% through an aggressive training safety program. When you look at solid waste in regard to the enterprise and the fund, we are 82% of the solid waste fund personnel and 6.6% of the personnel within the city. From a expense perspective, we account for about 59, almost 60% of the expenses within the solid waste fund and 5.76% of the expenses within the enterprise as a whole. Looking at full-time personnel, we are proposing a slight reduction. That doesn't look like an actual reduction in personnel. Some of that comes through, we took the Director of Solid Waste Services and reclassified that position to an Assistant Director of Public Works. So that person is now housed partially within each of the funds that Public Works touches, and they're accounted for within our Public Works Administration group. Along with that, this past year, we unfunded, at the beginning of fiscal year 17, we unfunded 4 full-time and 2 part-time positions for curbside recycling. Beyond that, we unfunded a residential operations supervisor over the course of this year. And then, as I mentioned before, we're transferring personnel within other divisions in Public Works. From a revenue perspective, solid waste, you can see their operational fees generate almost $18 million in revenue per year. We have some miscellaneous revenues there that comes from sale of equipment or certain disposal contracts. We get a little bit back from the recycling that we do, and those are captured there. We were allotted as a group $10,382,638 to accomplish this core mission in solid waste services this year. You'll note that that's down almost $1 million, around $700,000 from last year's expense or last year's revenue budget. You look at the explanation for that revenue variance. We have operational fees. The revenues increased due to the total number of customers. And again, I said before, we have about a 10% increase in customers, but there are some other issues that balance out that revenue increase. We also have some miscellaneous interest income. We have facility leases and whatnot at the transfer station. Looking at the expenses, we do have a balanced budget here with the overall expenditure at $10,382,638. I want to point out that is 6% lower than it was with last year's budget. We're proposing to collect more customers, 6% lower revenue there. So we feel that our efforts in the solid waste improvement plan we've been on over the course of the last 6 months to a year are showing in our numbers here. We've decreased our expenses by 6%. Some of that decrease comes through a decrease in the payment to the internal service funds and fleet services. Some of that expense comes at a decrease in personnel, operating expenses, and general expenses. We had no decision packages that were submitted by the Solid Waste Services Group, and none approved.
Mrs. King.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'd like to say to you, the Olsons, both of you, Ms. Olson, City Manager, that's a great job. I mean, kudos. You did an awesome job to cut 6% and still provide an excellent service to the residents. Great job. Great job.
Mr. Rivera.
Talking about services, I know you all created, it was created to give every citizen an opportunity to go and take some solid, and I'm talking about the transfer station, up to 300 pounds every month. Have you ever had any type of statistics? How many citizen goes through there and put that 300 pound in there? Because it got to be a good revenue there.
It is a It's nothing to balk at. We did, as part of our evaluation, we did go through the statistics of all of our free services. We aren't proposing cutting any of those free services, but we have quantified those. And when we present our findings on the solid waste outsourcing initiative in October, you'll get some greater detail as to what those.
And I'm glad you're bringing that out, because sometimes we got to show the services that we also provide free of service to our own citizen. I'm one of them that go there every month and try to dump my 300 pound, but I still don't know why I don't hit 300. I got to hit 600. It's my vehicle too.
Mr. Johnson.
I have a question. This question's going to sound silly, but no, this isn't silly, but I'm going to ask it anyway. Okay, I keep getting complaints from citizens that are seeing 10 employees out working on the street. Is there something like that you can send me that can help me educate citizens on why? I've been through, I understand, but I'm having a hard time trying to explain that, and I can't explain it correctly.
We can definitely put something together for you and give you some tools to respond to those.
Okay.
All right.
Then it was lunchtime, I'm like,
All right, anybody else? I think you're done.
Thank you.
Are we done?
We're done. What?
Second?
Motion to adjourn by Mr. Kilpatrick, second by Mr. Rivera. All of those say aye.
Aye.
We're done, and it's only 8:10.